muted on you or something? Is Zoom muted on you? On PA. Wait. Cordelia, can you hear me all right? Do you want to unmute yourself? I'm just going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, I can hear you.
That's great. I've got to put you back on mute.
Yeah,
You can't see me, I'm hiding.
great. Happy New Year to you all.
To you. Here, here. Yeah, there's a lot of signal here. So I'm going to go back on mute a second. It's standing room only.
Good evening, everybody. Obviously, there's a lot of people in the room, and it's going to get very warm, so we'll move ahead as quickly as we possibly can. We're not expecting a fire alarm, but should the alarm sound, please proceed down the stairs and out of the main entrance and gather in the car park next to the library. Please ensure all mobile phones and electronic devices are on silent. Please note that we are trialling hybrid meeting arrangements with officers and councillors who are not members of the Cabinet having the option to join the meeting via Zoom, and are also live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees present in person, refrain from watching the live stream or joining the Zoom link, as this will cause interference for our viewers. Anyone attending the meeting remotely must use their raise hand function when they wish to speak and to declare any interests at the appropriate time. As this is a trial, if anyone attending the meeting remotely loses connection, the meeting will continue and they will have the option to follow the meeting via the YouTube live stream. Any apologies?
Chairman, we have apologies from Councillors Steve Darling, Councillor Law, Councillor Morey. Hence, Councillor Steve Darling is hence why you are chairing tonight as Vice Chair.
Thank you. And just for clarification, Councillor Darling is with the Chief Executive at an all-parliamentary group in Westminster, representing the Bay in Parliament. Minutes. To confirm as correct record the minutes of the Cabinet on 13th of December 2022. I'm happy to propose. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, thank you.
All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Disclosure of interest. If any member has a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest, please raise your hand. No. Item 4, communications. Due to the items. So we come to the first substantive item on the agenda this evening, which is a public question, which we have received from Julie Adams, regarding carbon reduction in Torbay. Ms Adams, would you like to come to the... Welcome. You have 5 minutes to present your question, and I will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please note, time limit includes time for any supplementary question you may have. Over to you. Thank you, Ms Adams.
Okay, well, before the 5 minutes start, I've been told to read this statement out first before I go ahead with my questions, so...
It'll all form
is that
part
okay?
of the 5
Right,
minutes.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the Cabinet meeting on the 13th of December, Councillor Mike Moray cited that the Devon Carbon Plan was a scientific, evidence-led plan which forms part of the roadmap for Devon obtaining net zero carbon by 2050. At the same meeting, Councillor David Thomas asked the following questions. The climate emergency was declared by this administration in June 2019, and with the target being 2030, that's 11 years, which means we are 25% of the way into this plan. So looking at zero carbon, how much have we achieved in savings? In response, David Edmondson, Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, only offered the figures of 40% carbon reduction for Torbay from 2008 to 2020, adding government figures come out every 2 years. It will be another 2 years before we have figures for this year, ending 2022. That, the 40% sounds a lot, because a lot of that is achieved by the production of more sustainable energy nationally. So that has had a significant impact on Torbay already. Okay, so the UK only produce 1.03% of the world's total carbon output. in light of all these statements, I have the following question. Of that 1.03%, what percent of the UK's total carbon output belongs to Torbay? How is it measured, and how is Torbay carbon output measured? Who measures it and how is it measured? Do you want me to read the rest of the questions, or does someone answer those questions? Okay, right, okay. Where are the figures and reports for Torbay's carbon output found? Are there any trusts and charities involved? Who produces, owns the science and data used for the Devon Carbon Plan, Torbay going net zero? And where are these figures obtained? Torbay declared a climate emergency in 2019 and have the data for 2008 to 2020. What are the figures for 2019 and 2020, and where is that information obtained? Because if that's when the emergency was declared, I think we need a right for those figures. It was stated that the government figures come out every 2 years. Waiting for those figures takes Torbay to the end of 2024 and halfway into a plan whilst only receiving figures. Why is Torbay marching headfirst into a plan without seeing any previous data? Is 40% carbon reduction for Torbay, or is it nationally? How has 40% reduction in carbon output nationally or locally significantly helped the people of Torbay?
Thank you. And in Councillor Morey's absence, I will respond. This doesn't form part of your 5 minutes, by the way. It's a lengthy response, and we will email you a copy of it, and it will be circulated with the minutes of this meeting this evening. So the response is as follows. UK greenhouse gas emissions in 2020 were 406 million tonnes of CO2 equivalents. Carbon dioxide plus other greenhouse gases, i.e. methane, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases. Please note carbon emissions make up 79% of this figure. The source of this information is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy document, and there'll be a link to the 2020 UK final greenhouse gas emission statistics one-page summary. Torbay's greenhouse gas emissions in 2020 were 421,200 tonnes of CO2 equivalents. Again, the source of this information is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and is set out in a document, UK Local Authority Emissions 2020, and again that's a link. Therefore, Torbay was responsible for 0.1% of the UK's total emissions CO2 equivalents in 2020. The data set is collated by the government and combines data from the UK greenhouse gas inventory with data from a number of other sources, including local energy consumption statistics, to produce a nationally consistent set of greenhouse emissions estimates at local authority level from 2005 to 2020. They show territorial emissions, meaning emissions that occur within the UK's borders. The data show emissions allocated on an end-user basis, where emissions related to energy use are distributed according to the point of energy consumption. Emissions that are not energy related are distributed based on the point of emission, other than emissions from waste management, which are distributed based on where the waste was produced. The figures reports for Torbay carbon output can be found at UK Local Authority, and there's a link. And per authority breakdown at another link. So that information is publicly accessible. Previous reports on Torbay's carbon emissions can be found at Net Zero Torbay Report, Devon Climate Emergency. Please note this was based on 2016 data. The University of Exeter is developing an up-to-date, even more robust greenhouse gas inventory report based on the national data sets above for Torbay up to 2020. In this draft report, Torbay's emissions in 2020 are slightly greater at 437,000 tonnes CO2. The difference is additional data collated by the university. With regards to the involvement of trusts and/or charities, these organisations have not involved in data collection. However, they have been involved in local climate action. All studies produced for the Devon Climate Emergency Response Group to form the Devon Carbon Plan are available on Devon Climate Emergency's website. Various authors have produced the studies, including the University of Exeter. According to the government data available for Torbay, total emissions in 2019 were 469,100 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. Total emissions in 2020 were 421,200 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. A summary report on Torbay's emissions inventory is also being collated by the University of Exeter. This will be available by the end of January and published. It too is based on the government's data sets with additional data held by the university. Whilst government figures come out every 2 years, we have seen previous data and we understand where Torbay's carbon emissions arise from. The government data sets referred to earlier provides us data up to 2020. The Net Zero Torbay report by the University of Exeter also summarised where Torbay's emissions arise from and makes recommendations for priority. No regret actions, i.e. actions we need to do no matter what and that have lots of co-social economic outcomes. To help Torbay towards carbon neutral by 2030. These priority actions form part of the Torbay Climate Emergency Action Plan, currently out for consultation, alongside a series of action that our residents highlighted as important to take. Even if we could, right now, access 2021 and 2022 datasets for Torbay, it is highly likely that it would still show the same priority. No regret actions needed for Torbay, i.e. immediate actions across all sectors, with a priority focus on decarbonising buildings, including homes, transport, power and businesses. If we were to wait for up-to-date data, then even more emissions will enter the atmosphere, making tackling climate change and meeting local and national international targets harder. Therefore, Torbay's proposed Torbay Climate Emergency Action Plan is based on a series of no-regret actions and/or actions that our community deem important. Many actions will have a number of benefits for Torbay, i.e. economic and social benefits, hence waiting will also prevent these outcomes arising and ultimately will not support Torbay's ambition to thrive. Given the national data sets do have a 2-year lag, and to ensure we can track progress of the Torbay Climate Emergency Action Plan, a set of interim outcomes and indicators are being established. The University of Exeter is developing these for use in the action plan and subsequent plans all the way up to 2030. This will allow us to track progress in between receiving data from the government or university. Where local progress is lagging, the Torbay Climate Partnership will review and explore actions regularly to address this. The 40% reduction in carbon for Torbay does come with a number of co-benefits on a local and national scale. Addressing the climate emergency is an opportunity to create a fairer, healthier, more resilient and thriving society. It is about creating nice places to live and work now and in the future. Encouraging everyone to be more active by walking and cycling, improving air quality through the electrification of vehicles, insulating our homes to make them warmer, and eating more balanced diets will all improve public health. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to listen to the answer, you need to remain quiet. Thank you very much. There is considerable potential for the transition to clean technologies to create new jobs and skills, improve energy security and increase economic prosperity. Retrofitting energy efficiency measures into housing will reduce fuel poverty and illnesses associated with cold homes and create local jobs. Enhancing the ability of habitats to store carbon offers opportunities to reverse the decline of biodiversity and restore the benefits healthy ecosystems provide. These include reduced flood risk, improved water and air quality, nutritious food, timber and fuel, and accessible green space. To ensure we can track progress of the Torbay Climate Emergency Action Plan, a set of interim outcomes and indicators are being established. The University of Exeter is developing these for use in this plan and subsequent plans all the way up to 2030. This will allow us to track progress, including a set of local co-benefits. In between receiving data from the government or university, a final set will feature in the Torbay Climate Emergency Action Plan, which is seeking approval by the Torbay Climate Partnership and Cabinet in April 2023. That concludes the written response. You have 1 minute 49 seconds remaining yeah, it's a bit like countdown.
Right, okay, so I suppose it's going to be a little bit difficult to ask questions if Mike actually isn't here. But the figures and the charts that are out at the moment, and either other MPs are writing that the total carbon output for the whole of the UK is 0.03%. Now, if you divide that by the 48 counties that are in the whole of the UK, that means that each county would be putting out 0.02% of a carbon output. And the figure that I've got here is that Torbay are putting out 0.1%, so that's quite high, really. I suppose I can't ask the question because Mike's not here, but what on earth has Torquay been doing to output more than all the other counties?
Is that your supplementary question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms Adams. As you say, Mike's not here, so we can either provide a written response, or I'm not sure whether David Edmondson would have that information at hand to be able to provide an oral response this evening.
I'll attempt to, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you for the question as well, because it gave a chance to give a bit more detail this evening than we were able to do last time round. And I saw you trying to scribble down all those various figures throughout, so as the Chairman mentioned, we will forward that on to you. Our figure was 0.1% of the overall national figure. And the outputs of our highest ones are within the residential sector and within the transport sector, and that's what we're trying to aim all our actions on at the moment. And I suppose, but I don't think we're particularly high compared to other authorities. That is a split across the whole of the country.
Right, okay, while I've still got probably a couple of seconds left, if anyone actually wants to look into the scientists that have actually been silenced over this throughout the last 30 odd years, they will tell you that the highest output of carbon is a volcano. Volcanoes put out more emissions than the whole of the factories, planes and manufacturing throughout the whole of the world. The biggest output of CO2 is the ocean. If anyone says any of this, they are completely silenced, because what we're following here is we're following an agenda. And to me, it doesn't look like it's got anything to do with climate change. It looks like it's to lock the people down and to put us into zones. And when we speak about being in zones, that is a European Union. That is a European Union policy. And I'm telling you, that's where we're heading here. And I never voted for that, and the people of this room never voted for that.
Thank you for your question, and thanks for providing the opportunity to continue the debate around climate change. As I say, the written response with all the hyperlinks will be sent to you and included in the documents from tonight's meeting. We do have another group waiting to come in, so if we could ask you to leave as quickly as possible. No. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your patience whilst we swapped groups. Isn't it a shame that we haven't got a big enough chamber that we can actually accommodate the numbers of people that attended tonight? So we will move on to item 8, which includes a notice of motion. Members, we have received a notice of motion requesting the reopening of Torbay Road and restoring Hyde Road to 2 lanes of traffic. Item 9, Future High Street Fund, Torbay Road, is also addressing the same topic. Therefore, we will consider items 8 and 9 together. In order for the Cabinet to open debate, I will ask Councillor Long to put forward his proposal, and then I will seek a seconder, and then ask Councillors Dave Thomas and Councillor Chris Lewis to present their motion. We will then hold debate. Councillor Long.
Thank you very much. And I thought I was outlining the procedure, but never mind. But thank you for doing that. When the 13.1 million of future high street funding was secured by the council, the original proposal for Torbay Road was for some general improvements, including things like doing the canopy and place improvements. However, lobbying by the Preston and Paignton Community Partnership, with the support of many members, was for pedestrianisation. And there were 2 consultations, one done by the council and one done by the community partnership, which showed a majority in favour of pedestrianisation. This has resulted in the pedestrianisation trial that we are seeing at the moment. The council promised to listen during the trial and held a meeting with traders in November at the Paignton Club and did a bespoke traders survey, the results of which are in the report before us today. The report before us recommends option 2 of the options, which is partial pedestrianisation of Torbay Road from Queen's Road to the level crossing at Station Square. I'm going to initially propose that option, but obviously we've got the debate on the motion and general debate in Cabinet as well. So I'll leave that initial proposal there, and then your seconding, and then we can have the motion debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. And I will second the motion as put forward by Councillor Long, and I'll enter the debate in due course. And in the meantime, I'll call Councillor David Thomas.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman, and with your permission I'll stay over this side as I've got a number of papers and connected to the electrics over here. So I just want to talk a little bit about the process, and then my seconder, Councillor Lewis, will bring you right up to speed with the crux of our motion. So when this came forward, as you will recall, it was our idea, in fact my idea, that we had a trial. We were really concerned that if there wasn't a trial in place, there could be potentially a lot of money wasted. And I'm glad that the Cabinet agreed to that trial, and a provisional date of Easter of last year was penciled in for the trial to start. Now, for some reason, the trial didn't start in Easter, but we were promised that it would start when the air show was in play, and the reason given was all the infrastructure was already in place. Torbay Road was effectively closed, so kind of seemed to make sense to me, but for whatever reason, the trial didn't start at the air show. Fast forward to October, and the trial kind of just presents itself at the end of the season. I do find the process that I'm in this evening rather regrettable, in as much as that I'm not able to present our motion. I'm actually now talking against your motion rather than speaking positively in favour of our own motion, but that's obviously a process that you've decided to bring forward this evening. However, we still believe that the road needs to be reopened with immediate effect, and that is the crux of our motion. Appendix 1 in the report. When I read the report last week, it wasn't available. There was obviously an error. I raised it, and I'm glad to see that it does actually appear tonight in full. But when you read parts of Appendix 1 and you go through some of the comments, and I'll give you one of the quotes in there, and it talks about, I think the scheme is a good idea, and it has made Torbay Road a lot more pleasant to walk down. I've enjoyed sitting in my favourite cafe without traffic, pollution and noise. I live in Paignton and I enjoy walking to the town. Torbay Road was a place I avoided most of the town because of the crowded pavements and the cars who didn't like you to cross. Well, why have I picked up that when that is absolutely against what I'm bringing forward? Because what is really important about this is if you then look across to the amount of people in the small print of those who agree or disagree with that comment, the number of people who disagree outweigh the number of people who agree with that particular person's comment. So I think it is important that you read the comments and then you look across at what the overall view is that's coming out of there. Some really important points that I'd like to pick up and hopefully you'll discuss and give us an update in the debate. And that will be, what will the criteria be for evaluation at the end of this trial? How will you decide if the trial has worked or if it hasn't worked? I think the fact that we put forward the trial, I think we've already saved you X amount of money from this full scheme being implemented at the start. We now found out that the scheme that you put in doesn't work. And I do thank the Cabinet for at least partially agreeing with us tonight that the trial has not worked thus far. Because after all, if you'd believed it had worked, you wouldn't be changing it tonight. So we've kind of got you so we've got you halfway there. So you are agreeing now that the trial, as it is, stage 1 trial, hasn't worked, and therefore you wish to make a change. And I accept that, and I thank you for that. However, we believe that partial pedestrianisation, what you have on the table, is not the answer. And in a moment, Councillor Lewis will speak fuller about our motion and what we believe and why we believe it. However, just before I do move on to that, I do want to pick up some particular points from the traders who put together, they wanted to present their own views. However, they weren't able to do that. I understand that they've had to give 10 days working notice. Unfortunately, the report was published 7 days ago, therefore they were out of time even before the report was published. So I'm going to try and pick up on some of the points that they've actually raised. So from a trader's point, it simply isn't working. Why is it not working? Well, main reasons are disruption to road and traffic flow, inadequate parking provision, and detailed design faults. So it talks about the road closure being dramatically making Paignton's already got a convoluted road system, and this just overcomplicates things. People who want to get to their destination, they want to get there easy and without hold-ups, and any pedestrianisation of Torbay Road, whether partial or total, makes accessing the entire area, including the seafront, far more difficult. I mean, if you travel from Torquay to Paignton through Hyde Road, and then you want to get onto the seafront, the only way of doing that is heading out towards Clenham Valley, doing a hairpin, coming up over the top, and getting through that system. The new traffic trial system has already created new congestion points. Those congestion points, particularly across Hyde Road and Station Square, and the north and south approaches to Esplanade Road. Again, Councillor Lewis will talk more about those congestion points on Hyde Road. From a trader's point of view, no one gains from the new traffic layout. The loss of parking on Torbay Road is significant. It's stopped opportunities for pull-up shoppers. It's made it impossible for disabled and elderly people to access the street. And that poor access, combined with the lack of parking, has simply pushed people away from Torbay Road. The traders, having read the report, then draw particular reference to the car parking data contained in items 1.9, 1.10 and 1.11 of the report, and their view is it indicates and shows that revenue from car parks are now as far away from Torbay Road, such as Crown and Anchor and Colin Road, have dramatically increased, while the revenue from Victoria Car Park is down by a third. And again, in their view, point 1.10 makes it clear that the trial period has not produced any increase in visits and footfall to the town overall. It has simply altered the distribution, reducing Torbay Road's percentage from 47% down to 24% based on the November figures. The key point is the share of footfall in Torbay Road has virtually halved, according to the council's own report. And I think I'm going to hold it there because I want to make sure that we keep everybody's interest. And with your greatest respect, I'll hand over when you're ready to my seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for allowing us to speak. I'll try not to repeat what Councillor Dave Thomas has said, but this is a very important issue. And our motion wasn't put down lightly. We did a lot of canvassing before we actually put the motion down. It has been said in the press that we did it for political purposes. That is just not the case. We did it because of our residents, our constituents, the traders of Torbay Road were contacting us, telling us the fears that they were fearing before the Christmas period. And that's why I'm disappointed that we're here today and that we didn't make the decision to open the road 2 to 3 weeks ago before the Christmas period, where those traders could have actually done more business. But we are where we are. Councillor Thomas says about the trial. We were desperate for that trial to start in Easter. We were then desperate when that wasn't possible for it to happen over the air show and then the summer period. Both denied. And I think that is a great shame because that would have given a true meaning of Torbay Road. Doing it at the quiet period has not been helpful at all. Having consulted with people, it was obvious that the trial was not working. And that's why we put that motion in when we did, because delaying that motion for the trial to continue would have been of no purpose. It just wasn't working. And you only had to go down Torbay Road, as I did with Councillor Barbara Lewis on a number of occasions, spoke to traders and saw that it just was not working. The other part that isn't working, and as the Councillor for Preston, I have had a number of emails on the question of the traffic being directed into one lane going down Hyde Road. We're currently at a very quiet period in Torbay. When it comes to the summer and we have all the tourists down, that is going to be a nightmare for people travelling from Torquay, Preston into Paignton. And they will end up avoiding the town because they won't want to be stuck in traffic for over an hour trying to get in. The other day, before Christmas, it took me over half an hour to get from Preston into the centre of Paignton. It just doesn't work. So what we're calling for, belatedly, we hoped that it would have been done a few weeks ago, is to actually open the road immediately, not doing a half measure of opening up part of it and closing the other half. The trial has proved that it doesn't work the way it is. What we need to do is open the road now, hopefully within the next few days. We need to all sit down, having had the trial, and come up with a realistic solution. I believe there are solutions to it. One of the solutions could be to open up the Hyde Road, have it two-way traffic, and have one way going down Torbay Road towards the Esplanade. I think the area that needs to be pedestrianised, if any, is the lower part which connects with the Esplanade and the Seafront. You would then have the traffic coming down. If you had it one way, it would give you more room for cafe culture going down. You could widen the road. But there are other ways that we could do it. We've done the trial. The trial has proved not to work. So let's open the road, have that discussion over the next 2 months, and then find a solution for the Easter period and then go into a trial with one that is acceptable to the traders and to the residents alike. What could come up tonight during the debate is that we've got to spend the money now rather than later. Well, that money for Torbay Road was nil until the local council has pushed, along with the community partnership, to put some money into Torbay Road, which initially was to tidy up Torbay Road and improve the sort of facilities without pedestrianising it. We then went from that to full pedestrianisation. But the money from government was not there initially for Torbay Road. So I don't think that can be held as an argument for delaying or not being able to do a trial on a new solution. So what I would like for tonight is for our motion to be accepted, for the road to be opened, for Hyde Road to be reverted back into two-lane traffic, for us all to sit down, having experienced what we have experienced over the last 3-4 months, which will focus the minds of all individuals, come up with a solution for Easter, a solution which will help everyone. So please, Mr. Chairman, you know, I know some of the Cabinet members aren't here, which is unfortunate, but you can make the decision tonight to open that road and to start talks to find a solution. And that's why we've put that motion, and that's why we're desperate for something to be done today to help the poor traders who are having a difficult time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Alan, I don't know whether you wanted to come to respond to any of the technical elements of the options available in terms of the process to change the current trial.
Yes, I'll just pick up briefly in terms of the way in which we've carried out the trial, Chair, is that we've used a process called an experimental traffic order, which means that we will need to make a change to that traffic order in order to be able to make a change to the scheme. So irrespective of the way in which the debate goes, if your decision is that we want to make a change immediately is still going to take a period probably in the region of 10 days to 21 days, I think. We'll see what we can do to reduce that period of time, but it will take a period of time for us to be able to go through and make those changes. It's not going to be the case that we're going to be able to remove everything that's on the road within the course of the next 5 to 7 days.
Thank you, Alan. I think that's useful just to set the scene in terms of expectations, regardless of what the decision is taken tonight. And I think, for me, I reflect that back in the original idea was to have the trial in the summer. And there was a whole host of reasons why that was delayed, not least the fact that we had to have statutory consultation with, I believe, the transport companies, the buses, etc. Then there were procurement issues. Last year was extremely challenging in terms of, because I know every community partnership I attended, as did Councillors Lewis and Thomas and other Paignton colleagues, there was always that pressure and frustration that we couldn't get the trial started earlier in the season. So it did end up being a trial that started in October. It's interesting that if we refer to some of the footfall figures, about the figures that are in the report indicating the high numbers of footfall in, I think it was November, which were exceptional compared to that of May and June. And also in terms of car parking revenue, there was a whole period during last year, particularly at the back end of the year, that everybody thought Victoria Car Park was closed because of the plans for its partial demolition on the Garfield Road site. That has led to some confusion over that. Interestingly though, car parking revenues are up in Paignton overall, which is, you know, to be welcomed. I think in terms of the challenges about any pedestrianisation scheme, I remember when Victoria Street was pedestrianised and people said it would be the death of Victoria Street. And the last time I walked through Victoria Street, I think there was only one shop that was vacant, which was actually under offer. So I think there is always those challenges around how businesses adapt to the changing environment. Also, as has been alluded to, the original Future High Streets Fund business plan only included public realm improvements for Torbay Road. There was pressure through lobbying from the Paignton and Preston Community Partnership, of which Councillors Thomas and Lewis are members and active participants, to actually have a public consultation on the pedestrianisation options. That consultation was undertaken in February last year. And I note that from the traders survey that we conducted specifically and directly at traders before Christmas, and I was overwhelmed by the number of respondents, as almost every business responded, which was to be applauded. Several traders didn't participate for whatever reasons in that consultation at the time. I think some actually said that anecdotally that they didn't think it would ever happen. And of course, business people are busy running their businesses, particularly in the challenging circumstances that we have of a retail recession that we're seeing nationally. And we've seen recent reports of retail figures on the decline nationally. So I think there was support at that consultation. It did mean that the window between the results of that consultation, finalising a scheme, implementing the trial, meant it was really pressed, because I was one of the ones who was really keen for it to continue after the air show. I mean, it made absolute sense. The road was closed, let's start the trial at that period. The challenge about the Future High Streets Fund is it's a fund about regeneration and reshaping our town centres. We know town centres are changing, people's habits and retail requirements are changing, the way in which they use town centres is changing, and this is why, similarly in Torquay, we're having a major discussion later on the agenda about regeneration of the top end of Torquay. And people take time to adapt. One of the other impacts, if the road was to be reopened, is that the proposals for Station Square, which we know is a lost opportunity, it's the gateway to Paignton, it's the transport hub with the bus and rail station, and it's not the most welcoming space. So there's been a separate consultation about the investment there to make that more of a town square, particularly as it feeds in then to the enormous investment that the council and Future High Streets Fund and Lottery are putting into the refurbishment to reopen the Paignton Picture House. So there's a lot of interest in the community about that space. So we obviously hear what your motion is indicating tonight, Councillor Thomas. Interestingly, that trader survey, when they were asked about the partial pedestrianisation, only 14 out of the 49 respondents said that they didn't support that as an option. 19 said yes, they would support that as an option, and 15 said maybe. So it's interesting to see the balance of representation from the anecdotal evidence that you've relayed tonight, and also the feedback from that Traders Direct survey. I'll open it up to debate. Councillor Stockman.
So, at the risk of making myself exceedingly unpopular, I'm trying to sort of understand what the real issue is. We've heard from the Conservatives there, and I agree with them actually, that that this was carried out at the wrong time of year. So that's one thing. That also meant that the events that could have gone on, it was the wrong time of year. But what concerns me is the downfall in your businesses, I'm addressing the traders, purely down to the road closure, or is it part, if you obviously deal with food, that side of it, is it to do with a downward economic trend? Because a lot of people are not going out to eat like they used to. What I'd like to know from someone is the evidence, and it's been widely done by lots of people, where pedestrianisation has taken place. The evidence right throughout the country and Europe and the world evidences that the minimum, I can read some of it, case study evidence, suggests that well-planned improvements to the public realms, public spaces, can boost footfall and trading up to 40%. Investing in better streets and spaces for walking can provide a competitive return compared to other transport projects. Walking and cycling projects can increase retail sales by 30%. Now, I'm old enough to remember Paignton when Paignton had very little traffic. Only rich people had cars. So they literally, there was hardly any traffic in Paignton. The one advantage that Paignton has over all of the other towns is you've got your railway station slap bang in the middle of the town, which Torquay, it's in the wrong place, and Paignton hasn't got one, Brixham hasn't got one at all, which is where I come from. So our area, our forestry, is pedestrianised, and we've increased the seating area and the spaces around our harbour to make it more attractive. And I would say Brixham's doing quite well. So what I'm trying to say, given the advantages that Paignton has actually got with your transport links, and given that there was an offer to improve Torbay Road, and the evidence that does suggest that trading would go up by 30 to 40%, is it just because it was done at the wrong time of year? Do you think, you don't think so? Because I'm trying to understand how we've got to where we are, because this was a request from the community to look at this. None of us knew about it. Well, the community partnership... No, I know, sorry. But that's what my understanding was, that the community partnership, together with the neighbourhood forum, etc., brought this forward to look at. So it wasn't a particularly council idea. And I'm just really sad that the outcome has caused this division between everybody, because I saw it as a real opportunity for Paignton to be that thriving holiday place that it's always been.
Sorry. Carry on.
No, but that's what I saw. I saw the family holiday resort, Paignton, which was really popular, attracting more people, and the very fact that you can walk with, you know, families and children without fear of being run over. I thought it was going to be, well, we're all entitled to our view, but that's my view from living here all my life. I really believed that it was a really good opportunity for Brixham.
Sorry. I can't have debate. Sorry. If you continue,
well, I'm trying to understand where you come from.
Maybe some of your councillors who are representing you will be able to respond to those questions. Yeah. But we cannot have an open forum. It's not the way cabinet meetings or council meetings work, unfortunately.
I apologise, Chair, because I actually...
Yeah, so I understand.
Yeah.
The portfolio keeps asking them questions. Yes.
Yeah, and we recognise that, and maybe those comments can be addressed by yourselves. Okay, and Chris? Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking through all this, and we have to be democratic, and the majority of people did look at the partial closure as being the preferred option. So I can't see why we can't try this for a small while and trial this and see how it goes, and then and take it from there, rather than just opening the road and forgetting the whole thing, because it may well work well with partial closure. I have had no problem with it walking down the road now, because before, when you walk down the Torbay Road, there were so many things on the pavement. You know, there's clothes racks, there's A-boards and everything else you have to negotiate walking down the road, and then you've got the parked cars that are parked right by where the pedestrians are walking. So if you want to go in the road to avoid somebody, or avoid a buggy or a motorised vehicle, you know, for disabled, you've got to go in the road, and you can't because there are parked cars in there. And then if you do go in a gap to get past somebody, a car comes along and nearly knocks you over trying to park in that space. It's not ideal for the people shopping, the people walking down that road and doing their shopping. And I found it much easier while the road has been closed. And I think we should try the partial closure and see how it goes and see where we go from there.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. And just for a point of accuracy as well, the original bid to Government for Future High Streets Fund actually included 4.9 million for Torbay Road. That was only removed when the government actually failed to deliver the full allocation that we asked for Paignton Future High Streets funding, because we ended up with an allocation of 13.3, so the 4.9 fell victim to the shortfall in the government funding. Well, can I bring in Councillor Barron and Councillor Bye? Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. And really just a simple observation and a simple question, really. In your own document on point 2, you say, we want Torbay and its residents to thrive, and we want Torbay to be a place where we've turned the tide of poverty and give aspirations and jobs, etc. Except in the responses from the businesses, 3/4 of them nearly say that their takings are down. Their businesses are at risk, jobs are at risk. How do we square that circle? How do this committee look at these people tonight and say, what we're doing to your town centre is going to help you thrive. It's going to help you come out of poverty. When in reality, it's putting jobs at risk, it's putting businesses at risk, it's driving potentially children out into poverty, and people are actually losing their homes because their jobs are disappearing. Quite simply put, this isn't working. Listen to the traders, they're the people. 3/4 of them have said their takings are down, and yet you still propose that this is what we're going to do in terms of Torbay residents thriving. Torbay been turned around from poverty, and here we are tonight. There's people shouting at you, when you let them speak, of course, that this is not working. This is driving down prosperity. This is driving down jobs, and it's driving up poverty. It's driving up job losses, and it's driving people to despair. Please listen to them and turn things around and do the right thing tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think, like yourself, I am a Paignton boy with a suit, my late father's dinner suit from Perrett's, which I still wear on very, very special occasions. I have two simple questions to ask. I think there's a great strength of feeling from the traders, and absolutely my Paignton councillor colleagues have spoken very eloquently. Reading through the report, what I think is stunning, and I really would look to professional colleagues for confirmation, the statistics, the figures on parking revenue in Paignton are astonishingly low. So is it really the case that the Victoria car park, the annual revenue, has decreased from 33,000 to 26,000? I mean, that is, if my maths, which I learnt at Montpellier School, Paignton, my parents paid a lot for me to go there. I mean, I worked that out as about £100 a day. Is that absolutely accurate? And that the total parking revenue for all the car parks listed in the centre of Paignton comes to 110,000 over a year, which is a fraction of the parking revenue from one car park in the centre of Brixham. So my question on parking would be, you've heard the big hit that the traders from Torbay Road have taken. You want to clear cars, it would seem, of parking away from Torbay Road. Is there nothing that you can do by some concession with the Victoria car park to try and encourage people into Paignton, into Victoria car park, and spend their money in that part of town? Because at the moment, the income, unless those figures are inaccurate, the income is pitiful, really is pitiful. So please, can we have an answer to that? I find it almost beyond belief that a town with a population of over 40,000 has car parks only generating £100,000 in total over a year. And if that is the case, surely there's something that the council can do about it that won't be incurring a great loss that might be a benefit for the town. The second point, or second question, and these are genuine questions that I would like to know the answer to, is driving through, as you have heard from Councillor Lewis, through Paynton on the way to the other side of the town, or indeed to Brixham. It is very, very awkward having the single lane imposed in Hyde Road, and it looks incredibly unattractive with what appears to be just barricades that you might put up in the event of a student riot or goodness knows what. What is the thinking behind Hyde Road being single lane, and then as soon as you get to the station, it becomes 2 lanes again, as one goes round back into the town or for Totnes, and the other goes off by the library off towards Broadsands and Brixham. So why did it need to be? Why does it need to be a single lane, which has caused considerable congestion and which seems utterly pointless? So those are 2 questions. But please, I would ask you, the rather depleted cabinet tonight, if I may say so. Well, who knows? Maybe there's vacancies, or maybe you're just all winding down gently. But the depleted cabinet, please to ask you to consider the points that have been made by my colleagues, and to do what you can to save trade in Paynton and to support the traders on Torbay Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. And just for clarification, because many of you wouldn't have been in the room at the start of the meeting, Councillor Darling is in London with the Chief Executive at a meeting of the All Parliamentary Group. So he's representing Torbay, and Councillors Law and Morey are both unwell, but I think they may be in the virtual room. So they were unable to attend in person tonight. So, Alan, did you want to come back on the point about the car parking revenues and the lane closure?
Yeah, I'll pick up with the lane closure first, if that's okay, Chairman. And I'll take us back to the 2017-2018 period when we were initially working up the thinking that led into the Future High Street Fund bid. So that was working closely with Paynton Chamber, with the Neighbourhood Forum, with the Community Partnership, and using those routes to the community to get those different views. So ultimately, what's been represented within the scheme is the culmination of those different engagements throughout a period of time that led to the Future High Street Fund bid. That included the work on Station Square, and the view that was consistently coming through the Community Partnership especially was traffic needs to be softened in the Station Square area and the speeds need to be lowered. So the traffic engineering response to that is what's led to that change. So that's the reason why that's in place. Turning to the car parking figures, the figures which are in the report refer only to the period that the trial's taken place on. So they've gone from the start of October to the 2nd week in December. They are not full year figures. The full year figures for each of the car parks in Paynton is significantly greater than what's shown in the report. But rather than give full year figures, it was thought just to get that comparison of the period in the year before, as well as the 22-23 for when the trial's taking place.
Thank you, Alan, and hopefully that clarifies that point for Councillor Bye. And interestingly, for those of you who haven't seen the section in the report, parking revenue in Paynton for the months that Alan Denby's just described was just over 110,000, which is 22,000 up on the period 2019-2020, which is the comparator year given the COVID closure. So that's actually a 22% increase in parking revenue for that period of time. I've got Councillor Law in the virtual room who wishes to come in. And can I just make it clear to everybody that even though Councillor Law is in the virtual room and is entitled to speak, because she's not physically present, she will not be able to vote on tonight's proceedings. Councillor Law.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. I'm finding this a very, very curious debate. So I'm not there this evening because I'm pretty sure nobody wants my bugs, and that includes Councillor By as well, but I am listening in. So no, Councillor By, there's no vacancy. I'm a pedestrian. I don't drive, and I have to say that other people I know in Paynton, I live in Paynton, who use it, who are pedestrians, and friends of mine that have children in prams, we're very happy with it. We really like it as pedestrians. And I think that we need to find a way that bridges this gap between what the traders want and what the people like me, the residents and pedestrians, find conducive to going into town. I have to agree with everything Councillor Carter said, that I would not let my husband park there when my children were small because it was not safe to get a child's pram out of the car there and put your children into the pram. So this idea that parents and people with disabilities are being disadvantaged, I have to take disagreement with, because it's not a safe place. You wouldn't park up on Torbay Road to get anybody in a wheelchair or children in a pram out of the car. We need to find a way forward with this, because there is obviously this gulf between what the traders want and what the residents and people who are using Paynton Town Centre on foot are experiencing. I'm very curious that a lot has been made this evening about if the trial had been done in the summer, but I don't understand that, because what's the difference? If you'd have done it in the summer, yes, there are more people around, but you'd have still had that closure in November. So that wouldn't have impacted it. So I think there's a lot of game playing around this, and it's not serving anybody's purpose. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Please respect the opinions of members in the same way as we respect the views of traders. Sorry, I will ask for you to leave if you continue with your outbursts. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Thank you for calling me back again. I'm going to be brief because I know my fellow councillor will do. But I would like to take issue with some of the points that my fellow Paynton councillor, Councillor Carter, brought up. She said that we're proposing open the road and do nothing. If you look at our motion, we say it is vital, following the reopening, that an ongoing dialogue with the traders and the community continues to help find a solution for this road and the wider town implications. So we don't want the road opened and then walk away from it. We want the road opened at the moment to help the traders, and then to talk about trying to find a solution. That's the one point. I was puzzled about Councillor Carter saying there are too many things in the road and it's too busy and it's everything else. We've just heard from the traders, or we have over the last few months, how quiet they are and everything else. And if we carry on this way, there will be more empty shops in Torbay Road, and people are going to be able to walk there free of anything, because there won't be any shops left there. And that's why we've got to make a decision tonight. I take on what Stenby says about the road closure. We need to 10 to 21 days. We've heard arguments like this before, but if we don't make the decision now, it's 10 to 21 days later because we haven't made the decision. That's one of the reasons why in the summer we weren't able to put the trial in force. So what I would like today, and it doesn't look like it by the conversation we're having, from a Paynton councillor and from a Brixton councillor, we need to get on with it. We need to make the decision now to open that road, to have a dialogue, and let's get on with it. The longer we leave it, the more these poor traders are going to suffer. My residents, I take on board what Councillor Law says as a Torquay councillor, but I'm telling you, as a Paynton councillor, I've had more people on to me about, as I said earlier, traffic from Hyde Road coming in from Preston Torquay, And it's only going to get worse when we have more vehicles coming along there. It's going to be a real bottleneck, and people will just avoid coming into Paignton Town Centre. So that the sooner that we get that order, Councillor Denby, to open that road, sorry, Councillor, well, one day, get that road open, yeah, and convert Hyde Road back into 2 lanes. It doesn't need to be 1 lane. Get it back into 2 lanes, get the parking, that's taking out parking as well by doing that. We need to take firm decisions tonight. I know that we haven't got all the cabinet here, but we've got, as I think the chairman alluded to, we've got the quality. Show that you are the quality, support our motion, open the road, and let's start a dialogue. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to try and answer Councillor Stockman's questions that she specifically raised earlier. Community partnership. The idea did come from Paignton and Preston Community Partnership, absolutely. It didn't come from the Neighbourhood Forum, because unfortunately in Paignton we don't have a practising Neighbourhood Forum in Paignton, but it did come from the Community Partnership. There were 2 votes as well with the public. There was 1 vote from the Community Partnership done on the street, and there was 1 done by the council, and they were supportive of pedestrianisation. However, the criticism there was there were approximately 600 people, and out of a populace of Paignton of 40,000 people, it's a scratch of the surface. But nevertheless, you know, we went along, and that was one of the reasons why we asked for the trial, because that number in consultation was very small. We wanted to make sure it worked. You know, we've got confirmation tonight from Cabinet that the trial hasn't worked. That's why you want to make the change. There's some really, really important questions that I raised at the very beginning, and unfortunately at the moment they haven't even been discussed. So I would really like to just re-emphasise those questions so that we can understand, once you've made your decision, what the further steps will be. So if you make your decision this evening to ignore our motion and to go with the motion that you've currently got on the table, how long will this new trial last? I guess it would be March, because what's been spoken about. However, Mr. Denby tells us it needs a 6-month traffic order. So does that mean that any new trial will be for 6 months? That's the first question. The second question, and these are the important ones that I asked you early on, what will be the criteria for evaluation at the end of this trial? So in other words, in 3 months' time or in 6 months' time, after you made your decision tonight, how are you going to evaluate and say, actually, it's not working? So we've had 1 bite of the cherry and we'll come back, we'll have a 2nd bite, but actually now it is working. So what are you going to use as criteria? Clearly in the middle of this process, you're listening to the traders. The traders are telling you it's not working, and tonight you're at least half listening to what they've said. Our real big concern is anybody who's been in business, and I've been in business for 35 years, you have the good times of the summer, absolutely. But then you need that money in December to pay for your staff for January, February and March. Because it is cash flow. We know cash flow is king. And if you haven't got the money in and you can't pay the staff, unfortunately, you've got to let them go. Now, we know that a number of traders have unfortunately had to let their staff go. So there is a knock-on effect here to real families who now no longer have a job, basically because of the decision that was made by the council to the full road closure that we've got at the moment. And if that continues for a period of time, at what point and it will be a different point for each and every one of these traders, but there will become a point that they say, either by choice, you know what, I've put enough money into this scheme, into my business, it's time for me to either get out. If I've got a lease I might be able to get out easier, depends how long the lease is, you might have to continue to pay. If it is by no desire whatsoever, in other words, there's just not enough money coming into the till to actually make it pay, and you're on the other side of the line, at the end of the day, the bank comes along and says, sorry guys, enough is enough. We haven't seen any money coming into your account, any real money for, let's say, November, December, January, February, March, 5 months. And you go to the bank manager and say, don't worry, it's okay, because we'll have some money in August. I can imagine what the bank manager is going to say. Yeah? You can't make a business on 3 months of the summer. It's not possible. And our real concern is, if we don't take the right decision tonight, what happens if we have a road, Torbay Road, that is got a few pedestrians walking down it who are happy? Certainly Sustrans, our Sustrans guys will be very happy. They've got the 2 bicycle lanes down the middle of the street and people can walk down there. But if as a result of that there's no shops there and there's no income generation in that part of town, that doesn't help the councillors, it doesn't help the council, it doesn't help the traders, it doesn't help the people employed, and one thing's for certain, it doesn't help Paignton as a town at all. And if Paignton fails with the £13.8 million infrastructure input from government, that doesn't help us, say, yes, we're delivering, because actually, how awful would that be to have gained £22 million in Torquay, £14 million in Paignton, and yet we see a massive decline because of some of the actions that we've brought about. So can I please urge you just to give us, let us know what that criteria is going to be. At least discuss the kind of problem, the kind of issues that you're going to include in the evaluation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Swithin, Councillor Long.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say, first of all, that I'm pleased that Councillor Thomas and Councillor Lewis have said that they were arguing in favour of the pedestrianisation to begin with, because I think that's important. And just for a point of clarification, I understand that pedestrianisation was in the neighbourhood plan that was voted on, so it wasn't that. I mean, we have a difficult balancing act to weigh up. We've got in the survey the evidence that traders are wanting the partial pedestrianisation, or wanting us to try it, and obviously we've got people in the room saying no, we don't want that at all. And then we've also got the 2 consultations that were done, one by the council and one by the community partnership, which showed a majority in favour of people wanting pedestrianisation. So we've all got those things, all those voices that we need to weigh up. And I hear what Councillor Lewis and Councillor Thomas are saying, that they want to reopen the road but then have a dialogue. But everything you're saying is that you don't want anything other than the road to be reopened. So it doesn't sound much room for dialogue on anything else other than reopening the road. So I think, given that my personal view is that, given the survey results which showed a majority of traders wanting to try the partial pedestrianisation, that we should try that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. And Alan Denby, did you want to bring anything else in at this stage before I bring matters to a close?
Only just come back on the evaluation criteria. I take Cabinet's guidance as to what else you might want to see, but we would work on the basis of what we've had so far. So we would look for views from the wider community, for views from the traders, and then car park metrics, other data which we would collect in terms of footfall, and use that to guide our assessment of whether a trial has or hasn't been successful.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Alan. Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. I really feel that I must challenge the comment from Councillor Law, where she said that there was game playing going on. I really must object to that accusation. This is about people who are livelihoods are on the line here. This is not a game. This is listening to the people. You talk, I just wish that the council here would do what they say on the tin. Residents thrive, turn the tide of poverty. These people are our residents. We have consulted with them, and 3/4 of the businesses have said that they're suffering. Listen to them, so you've consulted with them. They've told you what they think. Look at them tonight and tell them that we are listening to you. Your businesses are suffering. We understand that, and we understand it, and we get it, and we will do something about it, because your ambition is to thrive and to turn the tide of poverty. Look at these people tonight, squarely in the eye, and say, we hear what you say tonight. We understand that you are our residents. We are here to serve you, and you are telling us that you are suffering through this policy, and we will therefore listen to you, and we will change that policy. Simple, straightforward. Can you do that tonight? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. And indeed, this council does listen, and it's been listening to the community partnership, it's been listening to the businesses. It went out to a direct consultation where well over half of the traders indicated their support for a partial scheme. So yes, we are listening, Councillor Barron, and I would like to think that some of the challenges that our retail sector is facing nationally and locally could be eased if we hadn't had such a kamikaze budget where interest rates shot up, impacting people's mortgages and the ability to pay, impacting the ability for businesses to borrow, to invest because of the hike in interest rates. And it's a pity that the government have failed to deal with the national with business rates, yet again failing to see how that business rate should be amended. So thank you for your concern about consultation and representation, but we have been listening to that wider body of opinion as well, and whilst there are members of the traders in the room tonight, there are equally members of traders not in the room, or members of the public who have different views. The ability to have the partial closure gives us the opportunity to continue a trial to the end of March, I believe, given the current regulation order that's in place. It gives us the ability to vary that trial, and that is what the recommendation before us is moved by Councillor Long and seconded by myself. So if there's no further debate, then I'll move to the vote on the recommendation for the partial trial. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes items 8 and 9. So we will now move on to item 10, which is the Revenue and Capital Budget 23-24 for consultation. Thank you. We do need to move on. We do need to move on with our agenda.
Car parking's gone up as well. You're supposed to represent the people. You'll get changed. You'll change it in the end. And the Torquay people can't get through. It will change. It will change. Doesn't make sense.
So we'll move on to item 10, the Revenue and Capital Budget 23-24 for consultation. I will be proposing this, and this is going out for significant consultation. So we're not planning to have a major debate on this evening because there'll be plenty of opportunity, and as is the usual process, overview and scrutiny will be invited to scrutinise elements of the budget through the Priority and Resources panel. You know, just to set the scene though, setting this budget this year has been extremely challenging given the pressures of inflation as we've heard about earlier. The Council's not immune to those pressures. Our energy bills are under pressure, the cost of service provision and placements in our care homes and children's placements are under significant pressure. That said, we're not facing the kind of colossal pressures that some of our colleagues are elsewhere. For example, in Devon, the pressures on their adult budget, I believe, is 40 million. And you know, we have got our partnership with the ICO, which has a fixed contract. We work, and we're increasingly working closer with our partners to ensure that we can manage those costs and look for opportunities to deliver services in different ways. The budget does provide for the allocation of the Community Ward Fund, which is going to be £72,000, as well as ensuring that we continue our commitment around sport, for example, with a commitment to a further £75,000. Of course, we'd like to be doing much more, but the challenge is that the government settlements that we receive are barely keeping pace with inflation. Since austerity, Torbay has lost out in the region of £700 million of inward grants over that period of time, meaning that we have severe pressures on our highways maintenance budget, for example, over £20 million worth of backlog of repairs there. We are really concerned about the delivery of the capital project, a capital budget. Capital budget is often overlooked in the budget setting process because people tend to focus on the services, and understandably so, and also what the council tax increase will be. We are in a position that we have to take the offer from the government to put council tax up by a full 4.99%, which will include the adult social care precept of 2%. Adult social care is in crisis in Torbay. Adult social care is in crisis nationally. And it's regrettable that the government have kicked the can down the road yet again in confronting the issues of how we pay for adult social care. And they're passing the buck to local authorities. They're putting the cost of providing those services on local taxpayers. And we see announcements yesterday, I think it was, from the Secretary of State for Health, saying that they're going to buy up capacity in local private care homes. Torbay is already doing that. They've been doing it ever since they closed the community hospitals at Paignton and elsewhere, where people used to be discharged from acute beds to those transitional wards at Paignton Hospital, for example. There is very little capacity in Torbay, spare capacity in the private care sector. And I know that the Director for Adult Social Care will be extremely concerned and is awaiting those announcements with interest. But the challenge is that those services have to be paid for, and there are some wonderful initiatives coming through the Community Development Trust in terms of how they can work with patients to get them out of the hospital back into their homes where they actually want to be. So in terms of the capital projects, we do have an ambition to regenerate Torbay, and we've been hearing some of those capital schemes in the Bay. They are challenged because of the inflationary costs of building materials in particular, and the real terms effect of the 40 million that we got from the government. Bear in mind, 40 million compared to 700 million pounds that we've lost in income is crumbs off the table. But that is probably realistically worth 25% less than it was when it was awarded because of those inflationary pressures and interest rate increases. So the budget will be going out for consultation. We really do want people to respond and to participate in that consultation. We are maintaining, for example, the live stream, such as tonight. I mean, it's been good that we've had so many people in the room, but there's also a desire for us to be accessible and to be accountable to wider communities through the benefit of digital platforms. So we're planning to continue that trial for a further year. So the budget has been published. And as I say, we welcome those feedback through member participation and businesses and the wider public. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, you do, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to second. This item, as you say, is going to go to consultation, so there'll be plenty of time to debate this in future meetings. I'm pleased to see that, unlike other neighbouring councils who are likely to have to cut services, we have managed to propose a budget that has no damage or impact on services, which, given the recent economic chaos of Trustonomics, I think that's quite an achievement. One thing I'm really pleased about is that there is also significant help being proposed for those people on low incomes as part of the budget, which I'm really pleased about. So happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Given the fact that we're going to be going out for consultation, I will read for reference the actual recommendation. And it is 1, that all members and the Overview and Scrutiny Board consider the draft revenue and capital budgets and implications of the draft proposals for investments in services, efficiencies and income generation. The Overview and Scrutiny Board, through its Priorities and Resources Review Panel, will consider certain specific issues arising from these savings proposals and publish its recommendations by 9th of February 2023 on the outcomes of its deliberations and stakeholder representations for the Cabinet to consider. 2, the draft proposals for investment in services, efficiencies and income generation are based upon the provisional local government finance settlement as announced by central government on 19th December 2022. 3, that public consultation will be undertaken on the proposals. The results from this consultation will be considered by the Cabinet, with the Cabinet's final proposals being published on 23rd February 2023. 4, that the Chief Finance Officer be given authority to amend these budget proposals for any technical adjustments necessary between services and within the overall envelope of funding in agreement with the Leader of the Council. And 5, that the Chief Finance Officer report to the meeting of the Council on 7th of March 2023 on the implications for 2023-2024 as a result of these proposals currently being considered and in light of the final settlement which is expected in late January or early February 2022.
23.
Sorry, 23. It says 23 here, but that is February 23. So all those in favour, please show. That's carried unanimously. Okay, item 11, Torbay and Devon Safeguarding Adult Partnership Annual Report 21-22. Councillor Stockman.
Thank you, Chair. I almost don't want to read this now because we've had such a long meeting already. So, the Care Act of 2014 places a legal duty on local authorities to have a Safeguarding Adults Board. The reasons for this is to protect adults in its area who have care and support needs and may be at risk of experiencing abuse or neglect and are unable to protect themselves. It is therefore required that we produce an Adult Safeguarding Annual Report, which is before you this evening for noting. The report advises us of what has been done in the past year to achieve its main objective and implement its strategic plan, and what each member has done, partnership members have done, to implement the strategy within their own organisations, as well as detailing the findings of any safeguarding adults reviews and any actions taken. The Torbay and Devon Safeguarding Adult Partnership was formed just over 2 years ago and covers the geographical boundaries of Torbay and Devon. This annual report is before Cabinet for information after formal sign-off by the Torbay and Safeguarding Adult Partnership. You will note that this report covers the dates between April 21 to March 22. The Chair of the Board, Paul Northcott, I believe he is present. Yes, he is present tonight, so I'm sure he will have a few words to say about the report, which I found very informative and detailed. Torbay is particularly fortunate to have an integrated care organisation in place since 2015, which means we have been successfully working in partnership for many years. The board has strong partnerships, including the voluntary sector. At 5.1 on page 24, you will see how the Torbay and Devon Safeguarding Adults Reference Group has a strong influential role in developing strategic priorities and scrutiny of partnership activity. The strategic priorities of the board can be found on pages 37 and 38. I would encourage everyone to read section 9, Key Partner Achievements during 21 and 22, as it gives a very clear indication of the direction of travel and what all partners are actively pursuing. Of particular interest to me is the fact that whilst the number of adult safeguarding concerns raised in both Devon and Torbay rose over 2021, the last 2 years, 21-22, Torbay's has remained stable. Both areas are still under the national rate. On page 32, there is an explanation regarding the numbers of raised concerns, which led to further inquiries in Devon and in Torbay. Again, both areas are below the national rate. Details of the breakdown of who may become involved in safeguarding issues can be found on page 33. Almost 60% in both Devon and Torbay are women. There have been 4 safeguarding adults reviews in 21-22, which met the Care Act criteria. More details can be found on page 34. Of course, no safeguarding adults board would be complete without having a performance and quality assurance subgroup, because there is a genuine desire from all partners to drive up good quality care to further reduce the risk and the need for safeguarding reviews and protect the most vulnerable. This group was formed in 2022, and more details can be found on page 36. And finally, I would like to say thank you to the Chair and the Board for their work during the last year, and also for the clear and concise manner in which the report is written, plus a personal note to the Chair, as he always encourages open debate and allows me to put questions and challenges to the Board. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you. For a change, it's myself, and I'm very happy to second this item. And as colleagues will know, I used to work for Educated Advice Line and often had to handle queries regarding safeguarding of older people, so I'm aware very much of the importance of this item. Safeguarding older people and indeed our children arguably are the most important thing that this council does, or any council does, and very sadly it is an item that doesn't fill a meeting room very often, when in theory it should, and it's much more important than is recognised. But happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. And given that Paul Northcott is in the virtual room, who chairs the board, I'd welcome any contribution you'd like to make, Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Stockman is summarised the report in its entirety, really. Just in terms of the comments that have been made, there is a real active membership in terms of the board from both Torbay and Devon, and I've been inspired really by the commitment, despite the pressures which you outlined earlier on in terms of adult social care, the commitment to the board and to the subgroups, and also to the work that occurs outside of the board process itself. From my perspective, it's been a privilege to actually chair the board in terms of that commitment by the partnership. So it's just a reassurance to you as cabinet members that there is active participation by Torbay, and hopefully will assist in addressing some of those issues which you raised earlier from a partnership perspective. But I'm more than willing to take any questions if there are any, or any observations if there are any.
Thank you, Paul. And before I bring up other colleagues in, Jo Williams is Director of Adult Social Care.
No, I think that's been a comprehensive summary of the report. And just to say that Torbay really values working with Devon on this. We are finding the partnership really positive, and to thank Paul for his chairmanship, because he really is an excellent committed chair who's, as Councillor Stockman says, is very committed to transparency and debate. So protecting the most vulnerable in our society, I think we do well with working with Devon, and just present the report for your noting.
Thank you, Joe. And any other comments from around the table or from other members? Just like to add my thanks on behalf of the Cabinet and the Administration and the wider Council for Paul's stewardship of the partnership. And I think it is another great example of how valuable partnership working is. Partnerships work. So thank you. The report is just for noting, and so therefore, thank you, Paul. Welcome to stay, but if you want to go and have some tea, equally.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 12, the Torbay Economic Growth Strategy Action Plan. Councillor Long.
Thank you very much for giving me time to have my drink of water just then. Thank you. The Economic Growth Strategy was agreed in November 2022. We are discussing today the action plan to support the delivery of the strategy. The action plan can be found in Appendix 1 of the report, and as you would expect, outlines the actions from the strategy, the role of the Council/TDA, the funding, timeline, and the measures and monitoring of the outcomes. The action plan directly contributes to council objectives such as turning the tide on poverty and being a premier resort, as well as key strategies such as the local plan and the housing strategy. It will come as a surprise to many that economic growth is a non-statutory activity of the council, and as a result faces pressures due to the pressures on other statutory activities in other areas, such as adult social care that we've just been talking about. 1.4 of the report outlines that the assumed annual minimum budget for this action plan that also supports the destination management plan is 614,000, and this paragraph of the report outlines how this is made up. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Multiply funding contributes to the action plan. It is worth noting that Torbay received 2.37 million from the Shared Prosperity Fund. By comparison, Cornwall received 130 million at a significantly increased allocation of funding per head compared to Torbay. This disparity appears to suggest that levelling up has passed Torbay by. It is also worth noting that the announcement of the second round bid to the government's Levelling Up fund has been delayed again, which does not help. And of course, that bid would support the fish market in Brixham and also high-tech in Paignton as well. This action plan could be more ambitious if there was more funding and could help towards the outcomes. Such as, and examples of what we could do if we had more funding would include town centre management, which I know all three towns would grasp if they could, or export advice, etc. And there's more items listed of what we could do if we had more funding in item 1.9. It would also help if the government provided more certainty over funding, including more than just a one-year settlement as we've had for every year of this administration. I would like to propose the decision in item 3 that the Economic Growth Strategy Action Plan be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long, and I'm happy to second the recommendation, and I think Councillor Long's highlighted the importance of having these growth strategies, but most importantly the action plan that sits behind it. That is what can be monitored and that's what can be assessed for delivery. And that obviously refers to the ongoing support for our high-tech sector, and as Councillor Long alluded to, we're very keen to see that continue to grow and expand in Torbay. The fallout from Nortel and many of the businesses, the Phoenix businesses that emerge as a result of that, make a valuable contribution on the local economy, but also are world and global players. And some of those components are to be found in satellites, but obviously not the ones from Cornwall last night, sadly. But, you know, it's about being able to support the start-up businesses and to ensure that we encourage people to be able to grow their businesses. But equally, and this is one of the reasons why Councillor Darling's in London today, is to be able to identify and encourage inward investment, whether that inward investment is encouraging government departments to invest in Torbay or the private sector. There's some really exciting opportunities coming through, which we'll be discussing a bit later, but it shows that Torbay is really open for business. So I'm happy to second. Any debate? Carl, did you want to add anything, or Alan, or any debate? Councillor Bye?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have to say, this is the most bizarre report that I've read since being elected to Torbay Council, which makes it very bizarre indeed. And Councillor Long kind of touched on it. I read the action plan, and I'm sorry to say it does seem the same old, and the things that I'd hope would be there that weren't there, and some of it does just seem the sort of dear oh dear. And then, as Councillor Long touched on 1.9 in the introduction purpose of report, you list all kinds of activities that, to my mind, are better and more focused and would achieve prosperity more directly than the things that are actually in the plan. So the things that you've left out and you're saying we're not going to do, the incubator and accelerator support for electronics and photonics, growth support through a Torbay-focused cohort using existing business growth provisions, Goldman Sachs examples of provision of subsidised consultancy, provision of export advice, support for businesses to accelerate their progress towards efficiency and net zero. It goes on. Support for town centre management, provide enabling funding for development, maximise the likelihood of bringing forward more employment sites, financial support to increase the use of degree, and it goes on and on. All the bits that would be marvellous are the things that you're not going to do. Where was the thinking? What sort of made you decide the things that seem to me that would add to our future prosperity are left out, but listed very eloquently in the introduction, and then, you know, it's sad to say, a lot of our waffle in the actual action plan? So I'd like to know a bit of the thinking. You know, they used to say it was the fish that John West rejected that made John West red salmon the best. But here it's the other way round. You know, you've rejected the best, and you've got in your action plan things that, with all due respect, I don't see are going to make a great difference. The other big point, which I made before in the when you were sort of working up on the strategy, is the need for housing and growth. I don't see how you can have economic growth without housing growth. And there's very, very little mention. In fact, I couldn't see any mention of housing growth in the action plan. So I think that is a very, very serious omission. Even if you move forward with jobs and prosperity, and we can see at the moment that there actually are more jobs than there are working age population within the Bay to fill those jobs. We accept that there's a skills gap, a skills deficit, but we have a diminishing working age population. How are you going to get from where we are now, which is the weakest performing economy in the southwest, to something more in line with our neighbours in the southwest, unless you have housing growth? So I think the omission of housing growth as an aspiration, and in fact there's a reference there to preserving employment land from the challenge of other uses. Well, the other uses almost inevitably is housing, and I think you should take a more balanced approach. Prior to tonight's meeting, I've looked at the latest census results for population growth in this part of the world. It is interesting that Exeter and East Devon are amongst the fastest growing populations in the country, not just the southwest. East Devon's population now is 151,000, Exeter at 131,000, and Teignbridge at 124,000 up to 135,000. We are neighbours with fast-growing, prosperous places that we, despite the wonderful new road and other transport links, we don't seem to be plugged into. Please, I think you need to understand the link between housing growth, population growth and prosperity. And until you accept that, I don't think we're going to make much progress. And that doesn't come across very well in the report at all. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bai, and I'm sure Councillor Long will respond, but I mean it's absolutely clear the fact that we've identified those areas in 1.9 as areas that we would like to be able to invest in and build upon if we had the budget, and I come back to that £700 million figure. And is there any other debate from any other Cabinet colleagues, other members? Councillor Long?
Thank you. And if I remember, the last time the economic strategy came, as opposed to the action plan, which we're discussing now, I remember having 4 formal meetings about it, various different meetings, and I think Councillor Bai and I had the same conversation at each of them. Councillor Bai didn't mention any of the things in 1.9 in any of those meetings, so for him to suggest now that we should have been having them, it would have been useful if he'd said those things then, as opposed to now. Would have been quite helpful. But as Councillor Cowell said, the point we're making in 1.9 is if it was a statutory activity, or the government funded us properly, or gave us more funding for that, and those are the things we'd actually want to do. So they are on our list for those. Housing. Councillor Bai is a key proponent of building lots and lots and lots of houses. I'm not quite sure it's his group's position necessarily, but the one area I would disagree with him is that we don't just need housing per se. The crucial thing we need is more affordable housing, particularly social rented housing. So just saying more housing I don't think is the answer, because that hasn't been delivering the affordable housing that we need over the past decades. And employment space, I would disagree with him about that. We haven't been taking a balanced approach to that because we haven't been doing enough of it, and I think we do need to come to a point where we do need more employment space. I don't know whether Alan or Carl want to speak on that point at all.
Yeah. Alan Denby.
Not specifically on the point that Councillor Long's just raised in regard to employment space, but more generally over what's at 1.9 as opposed to what's within the action plan. There are several of the proposals which are in paragraph 1.9 of the covering report which are covered within the action plan. So, for instance, around the growth of the high-tech sector. The question for us and the challenge for us is really around scale. We are, the previous item on the budget sets out clearly some of those pressures which we face as an authority. We're in a position where if we wanted to support 40, 50 businesses over the next 3 years to go through, for instance, that Goldman Sachs programme, that would require probably a 30 to 40% increase on the economic development budget, probably for that single item alone. So there is a real requirement for us to be able to find additional ways to support economic development. At the moment, our budget doesn't allow us to be able to do that within our own resources, and whether or not there are views that come back through the budget consultation that suggest otherwise, but we can do those different things. It requires us to significantly change the available resources. We were expecting, I think it's fair to say, to get a slightly different approach from the UK Share Prosperity Fund that would have given us a greater ability to do that. It's not just the Torquay allocation. If you look across the whole of the heart of the southwest, particularly in Devon, our comparison to Cornwall is pretty poor. So we need to find ways that we can either work within our own resources or potentially through some joint commissioning to get the best possible benefit from UK Share Prosperity Fund. We are working, for instance, with Set Squared through the EPIC Centre, so we will continue to try and deliver all of those things to the best of our ability. What we're trying to set out within those covering report, within the covering report suggestions, is that if there were to be more funding, we'd be able to act at a greater scale and get more benefit.
Thank you, Alan. There being no further debate, then we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Item 13, Paynton and Preston Community Seafront Master Plan. Councillor Morey would have been moving this tonight, so I said that I would move it on his behalf, and delighted to do so. And there is no doubt our climate is changing, sea levels are rising, and more storms are hitting Torbay. Consequently, we have been looking at our sea defences, particularly those in Paynton and Preston. Along with the Environment Agency, the Council commissioned an assessment of the bay's existing coastal defences. This assessment has shown that the sea defences we currently have on the seafronts at Paynton and Preston will only provide protection from flooding from storms for up to another 10 years. The Environment Agency says the impact of global warming and climate change is expected to result in the sea level rising by up to 29 centimetres around the UK over the next 30 years. It is therefore reasonable to assume that climate change could cause sea levels to rise in Torbay by over 1 metre in the next 100 years. Also, the frequency and impact of the sea overtopping the existing seawalls will increase, resulting in more infrastructure and properties being affected by seawater flooding. On top of that, more intense rainfall will increase the risk of localised flooding and erosion. At the moment, whenever we experience storms like Storm Emma in 2018, up to 90 residential properties and just over 120 commercial properties are at risk of flooding. The Torbay Coastal Defences report estimates that with another 50 years of climate change, the total number of properties at risk of flooding would be 352. By acting now, we can rapidly reduce this risk to properties. In February 2022, the Council commissioned an independent design consultancy, LDA Design, to assist with a revised community engagement exercise. They were tasked to undertake a more collaborative public consultation process and involve as many people as possible in the co-design of a new Paynton and Preston Seafront Master Plan, which would incorporate the appropriate sea defence infrastructure along with improvements to the wider public realm. At this point, I think we would all like to thank the residents of Paynton and Preston for their participation in helping to draw up these proposals in what I think is a gold standard consultation process. Several key objectives were developed forming part of the LDA brief, and these were: protect and improve the precious open spaces along the seafront, create a happy, healthy and vibrant place, and celebrate the special qualities of our seafront areas. The Paynton and Preston Community Seafront Master Plan, attached as Appendix 2 to this report, charts a design and engagement process culminating in a community-led seafront master plan that now has overwhelming public support. It presents a bold vision to deliver long-term transformational change, acknowledging it is likely to need additional funding to the monies already identified and will need to be a phased process. I would like to move the recommendations on page 4 of the report, which asks for Cabinet's approval to take this forward, including further design work being commissioned and drawing up and submitting appropriate planning applications. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Carter?
Yeah, and I'm really pleased to second this because we've worked hard on consulting on this seawall. We've shared several designs and included ideas from residents when appropriate and included that in the designs. And this wall had a bad start, but we've corrected all that. And now the majority of residents in Paynton support these new designs that we've put forward, as it will not only protect our town, but also improve the environment on the seafront, making it even more attractive place to work, rest and play in. So, yeah, I'm very happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Now open to debate. Kevin Mowat, would you like to?
Chairman, I've got nothing to add at this stage.
Thank you. Any other member of the Cabinet? No. Anyone in the room? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you very much, Chairman. And it has gone through a journey, and I would like to thank the Paynton and Preston Community Partnership for their input, because I think if they hadn't had their input, we could have ended up with just a wall. It has ballooned out of all proportions to now a £17 million project. I mean, it looks wonderful, and clearly it's got to be phased. My question, and I've had a number of emails over the last 2 days, is about Preston. The whole scheme was a seawall to protect Paynton and to protect Preston. There is now, I'm sorry, my computer went down, but from memory, it's £5 million in phase 1 that we're going to spend, and all that money will be spent in Paynton. So the question that people are asking in Preston is, why hasn't Preston been included? That the Environment Agency money, which I understand now is about 4 million, is all going to be spent in Paynton, and that Preston will not get a seawall until they manage to get extra money from the Environment Agency. So the question is, when will that money be available? And why is all the money being spent in Paynton and not some of it being spent on Preston and putting a wall up? Because if the Environment Agency said that Preston needs a wall protection and you're not doing it, why not? And when are we going to get the extra money if we're not going to do it? And at what timescale? Is it going to be 6 months, a year, 2 years? I don't know. But Preston has been taken out totally of phase 1. Thank you.
I think before I bring Kevin Merton, who may be able to respond to a couple of those issues, the reality is that coastal resorts are not funded for coastal defences. And it's an issue that we've taken up with government in the past, and I would welcome a joint letter between myself and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to the relevant Environment Minister, because they've probably changed several times since I last wrote to them, to actually plead the case for proper funding for coastal defences. And I think that I'm second guessing from before Kevin comes in, that the funding envelope of 5 million will only stretch as far as delivering one phase, and I think the prioritisation of that is based on the increased level of risk in terms of the number of properties impacted. But I'll let Kevin Mowat clarify.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lewis, for the question. I think I chaired the project board that drove this through to where we are today, and when it became apparent that there was a significant budget gap between the initial cost plan for these proposals and the available budget, it became clear that we needed to think about phasing and prioritising the work. And that was simply based on the evidence. So the project board went back to the Environment Agency and colleagues that have been working on this scheme for many, many years, and asked how many homes and businesses and critical infrastructure are at risk and in what areas. And it was clear from the feedback we got, the priority area, if you had to prioritise anything, would be Paynton first and then Preston. But Preston is very much in this master plan. It's not been omitted. Obviously you can't, unfortunately, put everything into a phased scheme. Otherwise it's not a phased scheme. It's a one-hit scheme. So we've had to make the difficult recommendation that we phase this work, but at the same time we are, as officers, have been speaking to the cabinet members about the need to lobby for additional funding, as Councillor Cowell has just said, and we have a really good track record of working with the Environment Agency to get millions and millions of pounds worth of flood defence funding for Torbay anyway. But the point that Councillor Cowell made about there is nationally there needs to be more money available for coastal communities. It won't stop with Paynton and Preston. It probably within the next 5 years there'll be a report before you about the Tor Abbey area of Torquay. And that's assuming that sea level rise continues and the frequency of storm events continues, and that continues to threaten our homes and our businesses and our critical infrastructure. So we are working wherever we can to extract more funds. We're talking to the Environment Agency about getting the money that we would like to get to complete the Preston element as soon as we possibly can. We know also that the community would like to see the public realm elements delivered. That will probably be through a different funding source than the Environment Agency, but it is an holistic package, because when we started the conversation, as Councillor Carter said, with the community, and we presented a wall, the community didn't want a wall. So, you know, yes, the price has ballooned, but it's in response to a co-designed solution with the community. And our challenge now is to go and find the resource to make it happen. And so, Councillor Lewis, in summary, nobody's forgotten about Preston, and I understand the concerns and the anxiety of people in the Preston area, and I can reassure them that we are working hard to get that funding in as soon as we possibly can. And we will be taking that argument and that lobbying to central government to try and make that happen.
Can I come back, Chairman?
Yeah, Councillor Lewis.
Great, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that's welcome. Thank you very much indeed. And clearly, there's no time scale on it, but hopefully sooner rather than later. The other point, the other issue I would say is that on the Paignton side, I understand that the whole scheme, the £17 million scheme, will be going to planning. I still can't see in the document what will actually be included in phase one, and especially on the design side. I mean, it looks wonderful, and I think no one would object to it, and it's a big improvement on what it was on the Berlin Wall. But what it doesn't do is say on phase one, the good people of Paignton will be getting this. When it goes to planning, will there be the £17 million project, which is what it says will happen, but will there also be details of what will actually be included in phase one? Because that is not clear from the documentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That, again, another good question. It isn't clear in the documentation, and the reality is we have, subject to a decision tonight, we'll be commissioning the design phase, and we're ready to go pretty much tomorrow if that's approved this evening. The design phase will take in the region of 12 weeks. It will involve further community engagement, and at that stage, Councillor Lewis, will probably need to speak to the portfolio holder about what we package up in that initial planning application. I don't expect a planning application to be coming forward until probably the end of the summer, because I think the design phase is going to take at least 3 months. There'll need to be community engagement along the way, and when we get to the detail of where will the floodgates exactly be positioned and what do the profiles actually look like, it's at that stage that we'll need to determine what needs to go in that application. So in answer to the question, I think the planning application process will need to be phased as well, and that will come out over the next 12 weeks, and it will involve workshops with the community, at least one workshop with the community, and further stakeholder engagement as part of that design process.
Thank you, Kevin. I've got nothing further to respond to, so if there's no further debate, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Move on to item 14, disposal of land at Little Blagden Farm, Totnes Road, Collerton St Mary. Councillor Long.
Thank you, and it's good for the seawall to give me a short break in proposing or seconding. In 2016, the Collerton St Mary master plan included this site for residential development. In 2018, the Collerton St Mary site was included in a bid for land release funding to secure its release for housing, and the bid was successful. The Land Release Fund award of nearly £2 million was accepted by the Council on the 14th of March 2018 by the Council following the agreement to the terms of that grant by the then elected Mayor and all the group leaders. The Land Release Fund grant terms mean that the site has to be released or transferred by February 2023. agreement was reached with the Torbay Coast and Countryside Trust for the early surrender of their lease on the land, and this was achieved in early 2019. The reason for this slight history lesson is to show that this item has been a gift to us from sort of previous administrations, so that's why we're here. To cut the story short, otherwise we're going to be here later than we already are, a preferred bidder was identified that unfortunately after work by them on due diligence, etc., a much reduced offer from the preferred bidder was received, and the council was not able to proceed for best value reasons, etc. There isn't time essentially for a fresh disposal exercise ahead of the February 2023 deadline. Transferring the land to Tor Vista at nil value will fulfil the Land Release Fund grant terms. Not complying with the grant conditions would result in a significant financial hole in the council's finances, reputational damage with the government, and that means it is unlikely that A, they would want their money back, but B, it may affect future grant bids, and there would be no benefit to the council's land supply figures either if we did that. There has been a slightly revised recommendation. Lisa, has this been circulated to everyone, or shall I read it out?
It was published earlier today, Councillor Long.
Shall I read it out anyway? Probably best. So the slightly revised decision is at 3.1 that the decision of the Council on 8th of October 2020 as set out in minute 159/10/20 brackets 4 be replaced with the following, and in accordance with the current policy framework which gives Cabinet the power to make this decision. 3.2 that the disposal of the freehold interest of the land at Collet St Mary as set out in Appendix 1 be transferred to Tor Vista Homes or a company wholly owned by the Council be approved, and 3.3 that the Chief Executive be given delegated authority in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance to determine the appropriate point at which to value the land as set out in Appendix 1, ensuring best value and compliance with the general disposal consent order, and agree and finalise any detailed disposal terms with the Cabinet Member for Economic Regeneration, Economy and Tourism and the Director of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long, and thank you for clarifying the revised recommendation. I'm happy to second this. I mean, this, as Councillor Long indicates, has been a long journey, and it's one that we are keen to try and get over the line. The Land Release Fund is time limited, so we need to comply with the conditions of that funding, which goes back for 4 or 5 years now. So we are disappointed that we're having to come to make a revised decision based on the ending of the preferred bidder status. But I think the challenges around housing delivery, particularly in the current economic situation, would make it a difficult site to deliver. There's some £2 million of grant funding there, which will help plug the gap of any funding differences in terms of making that site deliverable. It is important, it is identified in the Paynton Master Plan as a site for housing, and we know, and we've spoken already this evening about the urgent need to address the housing crisis in Torbay, particularly around that social provision. And it also chimes with Councillor By's earlier comments about the need to establish housing growth where appropriate in Torbay. So happy to second. Kevin, did you want to add anything on this one at this stage?
Chair, just one thing. This particular parcel of land, as you referred to earlier, is one of 3 parcels of land that were part of the original LRF grant fund, and the other 2 parcels are already sat within wholly owned of the companies of the authority for the same reason. It's to make sure that we are still in a position as an authority to develop them out for housing as the grant intended, but equally not to default on the funding condition which times out in February. So that's, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I have got quite a few questions. Thank you very much to Councillor Long for the explanation. So, as he said, the Land Release Fund was it was announced in 2018. You've run the council for the last 3.5 years, and you've brought this report here, which was published last week. So my question is around, we've now got the additional changes to that report, that instead of it going for nil money, the 18 acres being sold for nil money, it's now going to be handed down to the Chief Executive to make that decision. So my first question is, why has that decision been made in the last few days for that change? That's my first question. My second question is around in 2.5b, is that line, that wording, is that saying that a report, sorry, it's gone off my screen now, is that line saying that a contract does not need to be signed? Because in the line above, the other option was for a contract to be signed, and in that line, 2.5b, it doesn't say about a contract. So that is just confusing me a bit, that a deal is being done, yet nothing appears to be signed about that. My other question is that if there's no contract, does that meet the conditions of the Land Release Fund? So the Land Release Fund is being given to the council, but if there's no contract being signed, is that Land Release Fund, is that part of the conditions that would need to be met? And the Land Release Fund money, just under 2 million, as you've already indicated, where does that money go? Is that money going to the council, or will it be going to Tor Vista? So that's my question around who receives that money, and is there a condition as to what that money has to be used for? So will it be used for the infrastructure? So just a little bit more information, please, about what that money can be used for. Does it go into the council pot and can be spent on something else, or where does it go? So if you could just clarify that. And what's really, so it's quite a complicated arrangement. I can sort of understand it's complicated. I can't understand it, but I can understand it's complicated. And the aim of it is to get houses built. Every one of us in this room will agree with that. We want houses built. Yet, this is a deal that is being done, yet there's no mention anywhere of any timescale of when the houses will be built. Will it be 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years? There doesn't seem to be any commitment or anything in any contract or any agreement or anywhere about that these houses will be built ASAP. So a number of questions there. I hope you can enlighten me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. And as you say, I mean, this issue has been going around for several years, and as Councillor Long alluded to, it's one that we inherited. And I thought members did understand the conditions of the LRF, but perhaps Kevin Foster, my apologies, Kevin Mowat could respond to the particular points.
I'll defer the first point, which is the change to the recommendation, because I think my colleague Martin Phillips might be able to explain it better, but I think it's to do with the regulations under which we need to act to dispose of assets for less than a market value. But I'll ask Martin to explain that better than I can. In terms of to answer your question, Councillor Foster, about the contract, yes, you're absolutely right. There needs to be a signed contract with the wholly owned company by that February deadline. We are actually working on that in parallel right now, and that's the delegated decision that the recommendation is talking about. So currently, The legal colleagues working for the authority are working with the legal colleagues working for Torvista to draw up a contract, a proper legally binding contract between the two parties that allows this funding requirement to be discharged. So that there will be a contract and it has to be signed by that February deadline. Your other question was about the money. So the money has been granted to the authority already, and Martin will correct me if I've got that wrong, and therefore the local authority are the gatekeepers of that fund. And there was a prescriptive list of activities that the funding could be spent against, and they include things like the feasibility work around bringing the site forward, habitat assessments, environmental assessments, changes to the infrastructure to bring access in off the highway, drainage works. They're all itemised in the original funding application to government, and we are only able to draw money down from that fund, either directly if we're spending the money as local authority, or indeed if it goes to a new buyer, in this case a wholly owned company. They would need to draw it down across that, against that original specification. So to answer your question, no, they can't spend it on whatever they see fit. They can only spend it against the listed activities that were part of the original application, as I understand it.
Okay, and the last question was about the timescale of the properties being built.
Microphone, please.
Sorry. So my last question was about the timescale for the properties to be built. Thank you.
Yes, and at the moment there are no plans to put a deadline into that formal contract with the wholly owned company. And the reason for that is because the way that the contract will be structured will be in such a way that the council is still in a very strong position to influence what happens to the land going forward. And also where we are in terms of the current appetite to build houses, the market's gone relatively flat. That's the feedback we're getting from developers and from RPs right now, because that's a direct relation to the way the interest rate has changed in the past few months. So I think it wouldn't necessarily be overly productive, but the council will be left by virtue of this agreement with a wholly owned subsidiary to influence what happens to that land going forward, including, if necessary, getting the land back from that wholly owned company if nothing is being done in a way that the council would want it to be done. So I think what I'm saying is if the council has an appetite to deliver housing on the site, which it clearly does. It's part of the wider Colleton St Mary master plan, which has got a multitude of sites with housing allocations against it, and nothing is being done with that site. Then the council will remain in a position to influence how that land is used by virtue of the disposal contract.
Thank you, Kevin.
So, Chair, can I just come in back again? Because there's been a lot of talk about the contract, and I've just got it up now in 2.5 about the terms of the land release funding. So, A is an unconditional contract with a development agreement, and B is about transferring it to a development vehicle owned or partially owned by the local authority. So just to clarify, are we the council doing B, and does the word contract need to be added into that sentence?
So, Councillor Foster, the answer is we are recommending 2.5B, to clarify that. There will be a contract, although it doesn't say that, there will be a contract, and I think that's what's referenced in the recommendation. And it won't be an unconditional contract, which is what 2.5A talks about. So this will be very much a conditional contract, which really goes back to what I was saying in my previous answer.
Can I come back again? I'm
Thank you,
really
Kevin. Sorry, can I just bring Martin in to clarify some of those points?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify some points, what Kevin said, the council is the gatekeeper for the grant. There are grant conditions. We do have to comply with them. They are listed what they are. To a certain extent, it doesn't matter whether the council incurs those costs or whether the developer does, providing it's within the conditions of the grant. In terms of the reference to nil consideration, that in hindsight probably shouldn't have appeared in the report. The site has a value. The council paid the Countryside Trust to acquire the site, so there's a value there. The final value will depend on what actually is developed on the site and the mix of the housing between private and affordable housing and social housing. That will determine the ultimate value on that. And to confirm, there will be a contract. With all disposals, there will be a contract in place.
Thank you, Martin. Do you have a final point of clarification, Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. I'm still just a bit concerned that the word contract doesn't appear anywhere in the recommendations that is being made, and I just feel it's leaving it a bit open. Thank you.
Councillor Stockman.
Well, actually, Martin's actually explained what I was going to do, because I actually had a conversation with Martin regarding this, and I wanted the wording changed to lessen the risk. And so I was pleased to see these recommendations done in this manner. We find ourselves in a very unfortunate position of having to yet again take this action for varying reasons, and the last thing we would want to do, as I think it was Swindon said it, I'm not sure, was to hand the money back and not have that opportunity for building the particular types of homes that Torbay require. And so I also did question about the timescales, and it was explained exactly to me as has just been explained to Councillor Foster, in that we're on a very uncertain market, and it isn't going to be easy in the next few years. So I think you have to be realistic, do the right thing now, and hope and pray that things get better in the country in the next few years. And that's the best that any of us can actually hope for at this stage. And this is the only action that really we can take. So that's...
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Any other Cabinet members? Councillor Bye?
Hello again, Mr. Chairman. I mean, we really are in the poo, I think, a good deal more deeply than Councillor Stockman and others have suggested. We can't hand the money back unless I've misread the report and misunderstand the report, because half the money has already been spent on this site. I think this, this does raise some fundamental issues, and I've got some big points to raise on this. I mean, number one, I am very uncomfortable, and I would think sat in your seat, I'd be even more uncomfortable. A cabinet of 4 are going to rescind a decision, a hugely important decision, on a parcel of land of great value to this council. You're going to rescind a decision that's been made by the council. I don't understand how that works, and I'm not comfortable with that. I would have thought only the council could rescind a decision made by the council. And just for 4 of you, 4 hale and hearty, to make a decision rescinding a decision that the full council has made, I would be very, very, very uncomfortable in your shoes. Number one. Number two, you can't read this report and do anything but weep. I mean, it just makes you weep. 5 years ago, and I think there was input from our Member of Parliament, Kevin Foster, Torbay, and Paignton specifically, was given the biggest payout in the whole country, £5 million of the Land Release Fund to promote house building in Paignton. Not one house has been built. I remember quipping at the time, I think that the officers made a kind of speculative bid for this money, and with the support from the Member of Parliament, and goodness me, it would have had my blessing, and it was a rather strange response. It was like the officers I quipped at the time felt they'd won the jackpot, and the administration, in fairness, a different administration, wish they hadn't bought the ticket. But we got £5 million for housing development in Paignton, and not one house has been built. And yet we say, and we've had a review, we have a housing crisis. We've got 150 families in bed and breakfast. It is extraordinary of the failure of delivery, and we're now at the 11th hour. I mean, we're just a few days away from having to send back the money on this parcel of land when $1 million out of the $2 million that we've been awarded has actually been spent, which will be a huge embarrassment. But the whole thing surely undermines our reputation as a council and our commitment to housing delivery. You know, when are people going to sort of owning up to what's gone wrong and, dare I say, start making apologies for what may have gone wrong? We've gone through a very strong housing market. Housing developers have won appeals so that they can acquire land or that they can develop land that they hold. And we know that. And there are issues now in trying to get to Brixton, but we won't go into that tonight. But the whole idea that, you know, for 5 years it's been a poor market or been barriers to development. We have a pitiful track record of housing development. We've had £5 million come to the government, the largest payout in the country, specifically to support housing in Paignton. And at the last moment, we're now doing something a bit strange. We're releasing this land to Tor Vista. What confidence have you got that Tor Vista has the capacity to develop on this site? Is there? I mean, how many houses have Tor Vista built? As I understand it, it's hopefully 9 or 11 flats on the corner at Tweenaway. I mean, that's it. Is there the capacity even for Tor Vista to go forward with this? And there's question marks over the other land that the money from the government was intended to bring forward. I mean, it does not reflect well on this council. It does not reflect well, I'm sorry to say, on the administration. Housing is your Achilles heel. It is the greatest area of weakness. And we've got £5 million from the government that we risk losing a significant amount. So please, please, please reassure us that some houses will be built, and reassure me that you feel confident and competent to make this important decision when you are rescinding a decision that's been made by the full council. And there's just 4 of you tonight in the Cabinet.
Well, naturally, the Cabinet is corporate, so it's entitled to make those decisions. And I'll ask officers to explain the technical change identified at 3.1. But I think in terms of the strong market that we've had for housing in Torbay, 3 sites come to mind. Hollicombe, failed delivery by the private sector. Devonshire Park at Brixton Road, failed delivery by the private sector. Edgenswell Future Growth Area, 0 delivery by the private sector. So in actual fact, having the interventionist approach by establishing Tor Vista to have as a vehicle that in the future could work on sites such as the one at Little Blagdon, that could end up being in partnership with another RP. It could be a part delivery, but what this decision is doing is securing the LRF funding that we inherited, as Councillor Long outlined. Kevin, did you want to explain the technical reason why we're allowed to make this decision?
I would do my best, Chair. So when I started to draft the report, I recognised that the original decision by the Council made in October was since then there's been some changes to the policy framework. So the new asset management plan and has now changed the decision-making line for disposals. So although the original decision was made by council, because at the time that was the appropriate decision maker now for disposals would be the Cabinet. So initially I thought it was rescinding a previous decision, but I've been advised by my governance colleagues that the better wording would be that because this is a decision-making body, that the previous decision is replaced rather than rescinded, because technically, I guess the original decision-making body would need to rescind its original decision. Of course, technically, it couldn't do that because it's not in a position to do disposal decisions anymore. So the disposal decision rests with this committee, with this cabinet, and that's why the wording's been changed. So that's a very simple explanation, I hope.
Thank you, Sir Humphrey. Councillor Long.
Just to say that, as always, Councillor Bye does have some gall in some of the things he says. He doesn't seem to mind small groups of people making decisions, such as on the Land Release Fund, when it is his successor as mayor and his group leader agreeing to the terms of the LRF, because it was a similar group to this, making that decision back in 2018, I understand, for doing that. And also, he might want to have a word with some of his group colleagues who have been arguing for us to be slowing down development on things like Garfield Road, and asking us to take longer on it to allow for various other things to happen. So I feel he is a bit of an outlier on his demand for more houses now compared to other members of his group.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Barrand.
Thank you, Chairman. I really want to speak more in disappointment than anger, shall we say, because this obviously is a significant parcel of land, and I actually remember one of the first things when I was elected in 2019, we went to see this site, and so having gone through all that pain of getting the planning application through, and I know there was some resistance, and we talk about greenfield, brownfield site, etc., but having gone through all that pain, it's so disappointing that tonight we hear that there's no sort of real schedule. We've gone back to square one, and it reminds me of so many parcels of land around the bay which seem to be land banked, and so my point really is to stress my disappointment that, having answered Councillor Foster's question, that there is no sort of indicator of how long this land could be there. And to all those people in the Bay who are needing homes, and we're also talking about wanting to bring in members of the public to service our hospital facilities, etc. One of the things is a lot of people who want to come and work in Torbay can't because they can't find somewhere to live. And so tonight's, as I say, it's in disappointment more than anger. I realise that there'll be reasons why, but it's the disappointment again that this piece of land that has gone through all the pain of getting the planning application is now back to square one, and you're looking confused. But well, no, the Blagden Farm. I remember did a site visit back in 2019 about it. Anyway, that's by the by. Bottom line is, we're now transferring a piece of land to an organisation which has been portrayed as the silver bullet of bringing housing with Home Toll Vista. And once again, it's going to get this piece of land, and we're back to square one, and we have no idea how long it could be sat there for. I find that very disappointing. Thank you, Chairman.
Just to clarify, the planning permission was for the demolition of the, to enable the access to the site, not for a full planning application for the number of homes. The site was then disposed to a private developer through a tender process, and they subsequently moved the goalpost because of the changing economic circumstances.
Chairman, I appreciate you correcting me, but obviously one wouldn't have happened out of the other because that was an entranceway. But thank you for correcting me.
But in terms of those other sites that are owned by the private sector that I've just alluded to, perhaps if the government actually worked to provide policies that prevented land banking, then maybe some of those sites would have been delivered by now. And also if the government was providing increased grants through Homes England to provide registered providers and others to deliver those much needed social and affordable homes on our brownfield sites, then we would actually be delivering more houses than we're planning at Tourmarine and Garfield Road and Crossways. So if there's no further debate, I'll move to the votes. All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you. I'll move on to item 15, which is the Torquay Town Deal business case assurance. And I just remind people that there is an exempt appendix, and if we need to stray into the details of that appendix, then we'll have to go into part 2. Hopefully we can conduct a debate without the need to do so. Councillor Long.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Had a long meeting. In 2020, the council was successful in securing 21.9 million of town deal grants, subject to business cases being delivered and approved by the government. The town deal projects contribute to the town investment plan, which aims to generate a high quality, vibrant town centre, a better connected and more acceptable place, and a higher quality economy. There is one outstanding business case for a site specific town centre regeneration proposal, and the business case can be found, as Councillor Cowell said, in the appendix, and is unfortunately exempt for various commercial reasons, but we can discuss that if we go into confidential session. The proposal in the report is to support the town centre renewal in Torquay Town Centre by introducing other uses into the town centre to encourage footfall. Torquay's Town Deal Board met on the 19th of December to discuss the business case and which is part of the assurance process. The board agreed that the business case is in line with its expectations and supported the business case. And of course, the vice chair of the Torquay Town Deal Board is the local MP. So I would like to propose the decision as outlined in item 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long, and happy to support and second this exciting opportunity. We've been talking about housing and the opportunities that this site can bring in terms of that town centre regeneration, which this end of Torquay we know is in desperate need of that investment. And I think it also reflects the changing face of our town centres and recognises the shift in retail and the amount of vacant space we have in the town in regard to those shops. So it will address all sorts of issues and meet some of the aspirations as identified in the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan, the Torquay Master Plan, and as Councillor Long's alluded to, has the full support of the Torquay Town Deal Board. So I'm happy to second. Any Cabinet colleagues before I move outside of the room? Did any officers want to add anything before we bring in other members? No. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess anybody who is still watching on YouTube, first of all, ought to be congratulated for staying the distance, but they must be wondering now, what on earth are you guys talking about? Business case assurance. And we have a bit of an inkling from the chairman that it's going to involve a loss of some shops. We talk about, I also heard, some housing. Normally on restrictive documents, it's because of the amount of money. However, at 1.2 of this report, we're disclosing £21.9 million. That's within the public domain, the town deal grant. Why is this business case, why is the site itself? I understand we actually own the site now, so therefore a deal has gone through. Why is that within a Part 2 document? I could understand the figure that we paid for it may still be within a Part 2 document, but could somebody please explain me why none of us can talk about the actual site that you guys are going to give us assurance on tonight, but nobody knows what it is that we're getting assurance on. Thank you.
I think this is the dilemma of having the Part 2 details. And clearly, because of the commercial sensitivities that are contained within that comprehensive business case, that all members, including yourself, would have had access to and would have read, will be aware of the assurance that is contained within that about the competence of making this decision about a significant town centre regeneration. I don't know whether any officers have got any comments about the rationale for excluding the name of the location, but you know, I think maybe people can put 2 and 2 together anyway. But any officers, Alan?
So it's an assurance process as it's part of the Department for Levelling Up Housing Communities assurance process. So the label is essentially, it's taken from the guidance, so we need to follow through a process. And the business case, which is included with the report pack, is there to give the assurance to DLUC that we have a project which is workable and which allows us to be able to draw down the outstanding town deal funding. There will be more detail, which inevitably I'm sure will be in part 2 as it comes forward. As the project moves through its preferred option stage, we get a sense of what the programme is going to look like and we can get into more of the detail. At the time when the report was published, we hadn't had that confidence that all of the tenants of the site that has been acquired had been contacted. So there are elements of commercial sensitivity in terms of the figures. There's also the need to be able to make sure that those tenants that are now tenants of the authorities are contacted and communicated in the right way. So that's a reason why the business case was put into part 2. There'll be more information that will be being shared with the public and with the community as we go through the spring, working to have a preferred option later in the year, start on the planning process as well. So there's a lot of information in here. There's also a lot of, while the business case is comprehensive in terms of the option which we have assumed, there are further works that need to be carried out. So we also want to be able to put the right information in front of the public at the right time so that we don't create unnecessary problems for us trying to row back or steer away from options which maybe are not the ones which ultimately go forward, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Law?
Can I come back?
Yes, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much. The whole idea is for the Cabinet to have assurance. I think there are many, many questions that sit in the Part 2 paper about what assurance the Cabinet actually have of delivery of the project. I can talk about things that I'm not going to mention the site, I'm not going to mention the money, okay? But there is a vast difference in finances between what the site is and what the projected costs could be to bring that forward. What assurance does the Cabinet have, because that's the word that we're looking at this evening, that's in the report, what assurance does the Cabinet have that the figures that are in the Part 2 document that we're not going to disclose are achievable within the current economic climate, bearing in mind other Cabinet reports that have gone through this Cabinet as Part 2 have similar dilemmas and have caused additional difficulties for the council's budget that didn't need to be added in there if those decisions hadn't been taken. But this is the only opportunity of having that debate. I don't really want to go into part 2 to discuss the figures because I think it's been a late night. But in all honesty, how does the Cabinet and how do we as backbenchers, how do we ask our questions to make sure that the Cabinet, the 4 members of the Cabinet, 50% of the Cabinet, have assurance that they can deliver what's actually on a hidden tin? Thank you.
I think from my point of view, Councillor Thomas, and other Cabinet members may wish to respond as well, but for me, the robustness of the business case that is laid out in that Part 2 document it has been developed and written against the backdrop of the current economic climate. So there is already consideration in regard to those inflationary pressures that we've seen in other elements of our capital programme. It also gives me, some reassurance that the Town Deal Board are equally supportive of it, and further reassurance the fact that the MP for Torbay, who's vice chair of that board, clearly is equally reassured by the assurances contained within that exempt report. I've got Councillor Law, then Councillor Long.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always difficult when there is something that is in part two for us to discuss. It makes it very difficult, and it certainly always worries me. But for me, one of my biggest reassurances with this is the fact that it is something that's come forward from the town deal board. This is something that a lot of people have worked on together. This is not come forward as a project specifically from the cabinet. I'd also like to reassure Councillor Thomas that we have a lot of discussions on every item that is on this agenda before it actually comes to the cabinet. So I think my colleagues on cabinet will know what my opinion is and whether I'm in agreement with them. But what I wanted to say is it's my ward, and our town centres are changing, and research recently commissioned by the Local Government Association into, I think it was called Resilient High Streets of the Future. And that recognises that our high street is in what we call the new normal. It's going to have to deliver what the Local Government Association and its research calls experience as well as functionality. And I think that this goes a long way towards that. The research found that modern high street needs to cater for a growing consumer preference for experiential and wellness purchases over material goods. Our town centres are no longer just about going to shopping for our groceries and things like that. Most everyday purchases for households are made in out of town stores or are made online, and indeed you can even have your groceries, you can shop online, have it delivered to you. We need to re-envision our high streets, and this is a fantastic opportunity to do just that. I wish we could discuss it actually more openly, and I really look forward to the time when we can, because visiting our high street is no longer, it's a very different thing. Our high street has more and more become somewhere where people want to go and spend their time in pleasant surroundings and have a wider mix. It should have a wider mix of purposes nowadays, not just shopping. The modern town centre is increasingly becoming somewhere for leisure, socialising, and where shopping actually is more about the independent or more boutique offers that we can come forward with, rather than I think the large centres like John Lewis and that are left to the cities much more. What we have to offer has to be much more about what our local communities want. So I fully support the submission of this business case assurance, and sadly I am actually old enough to remember the area in question before it was in its current reiteration, and I can say with my hand on my heart that I really do see what is coming forward as a very positive evolution of this site and of this part of town. So yeah, I might not be there to vote, but as you know, I really do support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Law. And I'm reminded to clarify that the document that we're voting on tonight is to be submitted to government, and government will assess the validity of the business cases contained within that document. Any financial arrangements to secure the delivery of the project would then obviously be subject to further business cases, and if prudential borrowing, for example, was required, then the business cases would be submitted on a case-by-case basis. So this document is going to government for assessment. It's not a financial commitment per se, being taken tonight on a specific project, because that specific project is still to be worked up, and as Alan Denby says, there is a really ambitious and aggressive time frame with a view to getting planning, I think, in early summer, July time, and to be on site this time next year. I'm looking at Alan.
Submitting for planning in the summer.
Yes. Approval by the autumn. Okay. Councillor Long.
It's getting more Sir Humphrey-esque as we go on. Councillor Cowell was right that, as I said in the beginning of this item, this business case is being submitted to the government for approval, for their approval. They won't just file it and say yes, they will look at it. Councillor Law is also right. I noted that Councillor Thomas rather emotively talked about loss of shops, but actually this whole strategy is about bringing other uses into the town centre, whether that's public sector, etc., other public services potentially, so that there is more variety in the town centre, which will attract footfall, so that people have other reasons as well as retail to go into town centres, as well as housing to bring that added extra footfall. As I've mentioned previously, the Torbay, compared to other areas, has fewer people living in its town centres than other areas, so that will also increase footfall. And this item wouldn't have come to Cabinet if the Town Deal Board were not happy with it. I think we all know the characters who make up the Torquay Town Deal Board. Not only is the local MP the vice chair, but there are also other people on that board who are not, slow in coming forward and expressing their opinions. So we can be reassured that they have been happy for this item to come here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. There'll be no further debate. All those in favour, please show. It's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Move on to item 16, award of a licence for observation wheel. That's a Torquay. Again, there's an exempt appendix. Councillor Morey would have been moving this, but I've stepped into the breach. So to move it, Torbay's popular English Riviera wheel is set to return to Torquay when its current licence ends later this year. I'm moving that Cabinet agrees to a new licence for the 2024 season for 5 years, with the option to extend for up to a further 3 years in 12-month increments. If agreed, the licence will be for a 45-metre wheel at Prince's Gardens, which will once again offer 360 panoramic views across the harbour and beyond. A contract will be awarded following a procurement process, and the licence holder will also need to obtain separate planning permission. The successful supplier will pay an annual licence fee to occupy the site from March to September annually. They will also contribute funding towards heritage works at Prince's Gardens, including the upkeep of the War Memorial. The wheel is a popular attraction in Torbay, both with residents and visitors alike, and offers an extra reason for people to visit the town. It helps to generate an income for us, which we can ensure is used towards maintaining assets in the Prince's Gardens conservation area. The supply will also provide affordable tickets to cared for children and their carers, and ensure there's a minimum of one accessible carriage for customers. I therefore move that the licence to occupy the site, edged red on the site plan set out in Appendix 1, will be awarded to the preferred bidder as set out in exempt Appendix 2. Do I have a seconder?
It'll come as a complete shock to you that it's me, Mr. Chairman, and so happy to second. And just to reiterate your point that the licence is not planning, and that planning will be a separate point, but happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Any Cabinet member? Anyone in the virtual room or on the back? I'll just give Councillor Bye a chance to scurry across the room to... Councillor Bye.
I'm absolutely terrified, a bit like Councillor Law. I've now cracked ModGov, or I thought I had, and I'm almost into it. So I now know the confidential stuff as well as the public stuff, but I've got to try and forget the confidential stuff when we're only in public session. So, and I'm a long way away for anyone to kick me under the table, as Elizabeth Rakes used to do very genteelly when she thought I was straying. The two questions, I mean, I hope this is in the public domain. I think it is in the report. Is the site exactly the same? Because when I looked at the plan, the site seemed much larger than is currently or previously occupied by the wheel. So I'd like some reassurance that the site, it goes right from the back of the theatre to the War Memorial. It seems to be a much larger site. So I would like some reassurance that this is not a bigger site than they have, because the report does talk about an improved offer. Is it a bigger wheel? Is it intended to be a larger attraction with more ancillary accommodation, whatever you want to call it? So that's number one. Is it the same site as they've had previously, or is it a larger site? And then number two, the report, and I was trying to get it and how to bring it over and read it if it's in public domain, but it says there's been no consultation. And I thought that there'd been a little bit of friction with the theatre, who need to use the land at the rear of the theatre, which now appears to be being offered for the wheel, when they have the large musicals. They often put set stores and costumes, and because the backstage facilities at the Princess, as I know well, are very limited, but we try to overcome that in our quality of our performance. But there we go. So why has there been no consultation, and particularly why has there been no consultation with the Princess Theatre? Because I think that was an issue of concern before. And is the site the same, or is it, as it looks to me, larger than before? And I hope I've not put my foot in it.
Never, Councillor Bye. Alan, would you like to clarify?
I'll do my best. I believe that the site is the same as it has been for the previous, the existing wheel, but I will get that confirmed. But I certainly think it is the same. The theatre is aware. I don't think they've necessarily got all of the details. We're not formally consulted with them, but as part of our regular liaison with the group, we have made sure that they know that this is the intention. And then in terms of the wheel itself, it is a larger wheel than there has been until this point. So what that means in terms of its carrying capacity or any other issues, I'd need to go back and check with the team, Councillor Bye. But it's a bigger wheel. I understand it's in the same location, and it shouldn't be a surprise to Ambassador as a group.
Thank you. Any further comments from around the room? No. In that case, we move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Item 17, award of contract for parking notice and permit processing system. The glamorous one is left to Councillor Carter to propose. Just the ticket.
Right, we need to award a contract for issuing parking charge notices in line with legislation, and the permits for parking in our car parks and for the on-street parking. We, that is Torbay Council, act as the lead authority on procuring the system for this with South Hams, West Devon and Mid Devon. The system we have at present expires in March this year, and the contract cannot be extended. The original contract was awarded via a framework, and we would have to enter into a new contract with the present supplier for it to continue. We have looked for a cost-effective way to re-procure for a system, and this can be done via a direct award to the current provider for up to 2 years. This will allow for us for full market engagement for a new and emerging product to be included in the procurement process. We're therefore making this recommendation that a direct award for a new contract with the current supplier, Taranto, from the 1st of April 2023 for 1 year, with the option to extend for a further year, be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Carter, and I'm happy to second that and got nothing further to add because it is just an extension of an existing whilst we explore further opportunities. Any debate from around the Cabinet or further afield? No? In that case, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Yes, item 18. 5 child-friendly task and finish groups. Report of the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Subboard. I believe Councillor Law would have been proposing it, but she's not able to because she's not in the room. And I think Councillor Stockman was going to... and
yeah, no, I'm seconding. Really sorry, I haven't prepared for this. I didn't realise brain fog following the COVID.
Mike?
Yeah, so brain fog following COVID, so I wasn't prepared for this, but it's quite a simple response from Cabinet with regards to the child-friendly subgroups. The recommendation is that the Cabinet be recommended to ensure greater involvement in the child-friendly subgroups with young people, with a view to young people taking the lead on the subgroups in the future. And I don't know whether Councillor Law is going to speak at all, but I understand she has recently met with UNICEF, which she spoke about recently. And the idea is that if we join a larger group that identifies the voice of the child, I think we'll get more support and training and varying things. That's my understanding of it. And that, yeah, I mean, obviously, when these subgroups are set up, it is really important that the young people's voice is heard. And all I can say is that I fully agree with the Cabinet's response to take on board what was recommended from the subgroups. So I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. I mean, anything that allows young people to hear their voice being said at these groups, especially when the groups actually affect them and it's decisions for them and their future. So, yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to say, because in the paperwork it does say that I was having the meeting with UNICEF on the 1st of December, which I did. That was myself, Nancy Meown, our Director of Children's Services, Councillor Darling, sorry, and Anne-Marie Bond, our Chief Executive. And I'm delighted to say that it was a really good and really productive meeting, and UNICEF have put together an offer of a package of support and training for us and for our partners to help further our ambition of becoming child friendly. And one of the focuses of that support will be about involving our young people and involving the voice of our young people in every level and everything we do, actually. So our Director of Children's Services and our Chief Executive are now taking this forward, and I'm pretty sure that there'll be a further update to overview and scrutiny in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Bye.
It's just, Mr. Chairman, to clarify that this is your response to the overview and scrutiny subboard, not the groups, not the individual groups, which I think I wasn't convinced. Sorry, you're sort of nodding now, but I think you actually said it was the groups. But never mind. Oh, are you all right? Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Oh dear. So it's your response is the overview and scrutiny board's recommendation, and as chairman of the children's overview and scrutiny board, I just want to say thank you very much, and we can perhaps end this lengthy meeting on a happy note, and say thank you very much for taking on board the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, so that we hear more clearly the voice of the child in the sort of future place shaping. So on that happy note, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bai. Yes, it's late. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. And thank you very much, everybody, for what, as Councillor Bai says, has been a very long meeting, a huge agenda, and we've managed to finish at 20 to 9. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed.